Chapter 799. If the Death God mercenary group entered King Ling's tomb first, they would definitely send someone to guard the entrance of the tomb, not allowing other mercenary groups or tomb robbers to enter. Being in a high position, especially for a mercenary group like them, who were ranked third on the honor board, there would definitely be many people who would take the opportunity to give them a fatal blow while they were on a mission. Because of this, if they waited for the Death God mercenary group to arrive, they might be treated as a killer group with ill intentions. Not only would they attract the Death God mercenary group's suspicions, they might not even have the chance to enter King Ling's tomb. This was the reason why Yi Qing Luo urged the youngsters to set off early in the morning. If they met in the tomb, the Death God mercenary group would only think of their small team as a group of children who did not know the immensity of heaven and earth and were not afraid of death. Yi Qing Luo called out Shiju and asked it to search around. As for herself, she released her perception and led the youngsters towards the entrance of King Ling's tomb. The nearer they got, the more they sensed a damp smell along with the Yin wind. That smell was extremely strange as it filled their nostrils with a musty stench, making one's stomach churn. Yi Qing Luo's brows creased. Even though she had been on countless of bloody corpses on the battlefield and had smelled all kinds of corpse stench, towards the smell, she was not used to it. The brothers behind her would probably find it harder to adapt. Her fingertips swept across the profound phoenix ring, and a palm-sized jade box appeared in her palm. Yi Qing Luo passed the box over. Everyone swallow one pill before entering. The box was passed down one by one, and after those youngsters swallowed the pill, that pungent moldy smell instantly disappeared and their noses were filled with a refreshing smell. Yi Qing Luo didn't bother about the youngsters' dumbstruck expressions. This was the fresh air pill, which she had refined through the night. The corpse qi in the tomb was dense, and as it was in the dark all year round, the air would definitely not circulate well. If one was slightly careless, it was possible to be corroded by the yin qi. Hence, she specially refined this kind of low-grade medicinal pill, which was of little value. The few of them had just stepped into the tomb entrance when Qiao Jin and Yan Xiao carried two huge luminous pearls as they walked at the front. Tong Ziqing and Long Yunzhan walked at the back. The entire pitch-black cave became much brighter. The tomb's rock walls were still dripping with water. It was cold and smooth to the touch, extremely disgusting. If it weren't for the fact that these youths couldn't smell the stench, they would have probably vomited by now. However, the strange totem that was outlined on the dripping rock walls, as well as the feeling of yin qi assaulting them, made them feel an inexplicable sense of irritation. More than 90 people walked with trepidation for about the time it took for half an incense stick to burn. Yi Qing Luo suddenly stopped in her tracks. Her gaze was fixed on a certain spot, and her expression suddenly became cold. "Gather. Be careful." The 90 or so mercenaries immediately moved closer to their brothers, looking around vigilantly with a serious expression on their faces. After a moment of silence, the surroundings were quiet. Apart from their breathing, there was no other sound. The youths remained vigilant. Yi Qing Luo slowly walked past Qiao Jin and walked to the front as her gaze swept across the surrounding rock walls. Her half-squinted charming eyes, in this strange tomb, seemed especially gloomy and cold. The corners of her mouth curled into a cold smile. She moved her 5 fingers, and a red feather fan appeared on her fingertips like a flame. "You have the guts to follow, but don't have the guts to show yourself." Her words had just ended when Yi Qing Luo's figure suddenly swayed, and in a blink of an eye, she seemed to have blended into the air. Immediately after, Yi Qing Luo's figure appeared beside one of the rock walls, and her 5 fingers pinched the top of the rock wall. Chapter 800. When the rock wall was peeled off, there were hands, legs, and also a head. His neck was pressed against by Yi Qing Luo's feather fan. The youngsters were instantly shocked as they looked at the person in Yi Qing Luo's hand, who was like a rock wall. Following that, the crowd reacted swiftly as they looked at the surrounding rock walls, staring at those strange contours of the rock walls. Xiao Jin and the others had already leapt up as they speedily pounced towards the direction of those rock walls. No wonder when they entered the tomb, their hearts felt extremely uneasy and inexplicably gloomy. It turned out that ever since they entered the tomb, they had been targeted. Xiao Jin and the others moved, and those rock wall people who were attached to the rock walls also gave up on their disguise. One by one, they flew out from the rock walls and directly charged towards the 90 over young mercenaries. Luckily, these youngsters had already been trained by Yi Qing Luo and the others, and their reaction speed was extremely fast. At the instant when the rock wall people charged over, the young mercenaries swiftly got into formation as they swiftly drew out their own weapons and retaliated. It looked like these rock wall people totally didn't care about their comrade's life and death. Or perhaps the person in her hand was merely a small fry. Yi Qing Luo's fingers locked onto the person in her hand as her feather fan curled slightly, drawing a beautiful arc. Her fingers opened up and the rock wall softly fell beneath her feet as fresh blood mixed with the wet soil on the ground. Following that, Yi Qing Luo's feet moved as she dashed into this chaotic battle. There were around 20 over rock wall people, and their bodies were plastered on the rock wall as a disguise, but it didn't affect their battle agility at all. Their teamwork was also very orderly. Every move seemed to be compatible with their companions. It was extremely natural. Their attacks were extremely ferocious. Yi Qing Luo squinted her eyes, and after a few twists and turns, she landed next to Xiao Bo. Xiao Bo, these people's skills don't look like an ordinary organization. To put it more accurately, they didn't look like professional killers from the killer hall. Their skills and moves, as well as the degree of tacit coordination, on the contrary. It seemed like a certain team. I discovered it too. Xiao Bo raised his leg and fiercely kicked away a cliff man that was pouncing towards him. His face was slightly pale. The opponent is very strong. At the very least, his profound rank should be above Mystic Profound rank 3, and his moves are very direct. Indeed, when she saw the ambush, Yi Qing Luo's first reaction was, these people were the killers sent by Shengguan Liuli. But after fighting for a while, Yi Qing Luo had completely dispelled this idea. Shengguan Liuli, Yan Zhan, and Ji Tsongtian, these three people absolutely didn't have such a powerful trump card. Otherwise, they would have taken it out long ago as their capital to flaunt their prowess. Could they be from the Blood Demon group? Or the two of them were discussing when suddenly that rock wall man who was kicked away under the support of his comrade suddenly made a turn and directly attacked towards Yi Qing Luo's direction. Yi Qing Luo's eyes turned cold as she swiftly retreated. However, he was still a step too late. The rock man's 5 fingers had already locked onto Yi Qing Luo's wrist. Yi Qing Luo flipped the feather fan in her right hand and swiftly struck towards the rock man's head. That rock wall man wasn't afraid at all as he directly clasped Yi Qing Luo's left index finger as his fingertip moved slightly. However, in the next second, the rock man was dumbfounded. Even though his face was disguised by the rock wall, it couldn't conceal the other party's expression. Yi Qing Luo's left index finger was encircled by a demonic red glow as the profound phoenix ring stuck onto her skin tightly. No matter how much strength the rock wall man used, it was unable to make the profound phoenix ring show any signs of falling off. Yi Qing Luo's gaze instantly turned serene. Chapter 801. The rock wall man crashed onto the sharp rock wall with a bang. Those sharp stones pierced right through the rock wall man's heart. Yi Qing Luo lowered her eyes and looked at the profound phoenix ring on her finger. The other party's motive was the profound phoenix ring. After finding out the destination of her mission, they specially disguised it as a rock wall, just to snatch the profound phoenix ring when she was unprepared. Yi Qing Luo squinted her eyes as she thought of the rock wall men's skills and chemistry that Xiaobo had analyzed. Could it be? Not Godless Island's people. A lowly voice with an extremely cold tone came from behind him. That pink dumpling unknowingly stood behind her. Its empty and soundless eyes gazed at Yi Qing Luo as it repeated word by word. Not Godless Island. Yi Qing Luo's expression changed. Not Godless Island. In her memory, there was only that one time when Godless Island sent out the three evils to snatch her profound phoenix ring. Other than Godless Island, who else would be interested in the profound phoenix ring? Could it be that the news of her possessing the profound phoenix ring had been leaked out? No, it couldn't be. If the Overlord's profound phoenix ring fell into the hands of a frail young lady, it would definitely be snatched by numerous high-leveled cultivators who didn't want to possess the Overlord's divine relic. Moreover, Mo Yuying's appearance and Godless Island seemed to have some kind of unexplainable relationship. When she first met Godless Island's three evils, she met Mo Yuying. Today, the moment she thought of whether these people were from Godless Island, Mo Yuying immediately denied it. How could Mo Yuying be so sure? Qing Luo, you have the soul-chasing powder on you. Long Yunzhan's cold voice revealed a hint of solemnity. He swiftly went forward and grabbed Yi Qing Luo's arm. He saw a green glow on Yi Qing Luo's elbow, faintly flashing. If one didn't look closely, it was impossible to detect. Yi Qing Luo's fingertip brushed past that green glow, and indeed a thin layer of powder was swept off. Her half-squinted eyes, under the illumination of the luminous pearl, were suffused with a faint, cold glint. The soul-chasing powder, as the name suggested, would chase the soul to the ends of the earth, relentlessly following it. It was used to track a person's whereabouts. He only needed to sprinkle a bit of soul-chasing powder, and he would be able to track that person for up to 3 days. As for the soul-chasing powder, it would melt upon contact with water. The person who had been poisoned by it would not even notice it. Who were you in contact with last night? Long Yunzhan asked solemnly. Last night, after leaving the Three Springs sect, she went straight to the old house. Wait a minute. Three Springs sect? Yi Fengru. Yes, at the dinner table yesterday. Yi Fengru sat next to her. No wonder he had inexplicably mentioned her situation in the academy to Yi Tianquang and the old ancestor, and even told them about her refusal to enter the class of gods. This method was clearly to let Yi Tianquang and the elder ancestor's attitude affect her emotions, and then take the opportunity to sprinkle soul-chasing powder on her arm. What was his purpose in doing this? Why would he want to know her whereabouts? Could it be that the ambush by the rockmen had something to do with Yi Fengru? Yi Qing Luo's eyes turned increasingly gloomy and cold. She casually wiped the dripping water on the rock wall and dissolved the soul-chasing powder on her arm. When her vision was fixed on the rockmen again, her lips suddenly curled into a chilly smile. The feather fan in her hand was like a dancing red flame, constantly blooming the most beautiful fireworks. Her action was extremely fast. The target of these rockmen was originally to snatch the profound phoenix ring. But for some reason, the profound phoenix ring could not be removed from Yi Qing Luo's hand. Chapter 802. These youngsters were able to see through all their attacks in the shortest time possible, and after pondering for a few breaths, they were able to come up with a set of methods to restrain them. Their power of understanding and potential was simply too shocking. Immediately, one of the Rockwall men decided to retreat. But unexpectedly, just as he said this word, a gust of chilly wind struck him. The rock wall man had not regained his senses when a tight, icy cold sensation pressed against his neck. By the side of his ear was a young lady's enchanting laughter. "Who are you?" To catch bandits, first catch the ringleader. This was an unchanging logic since ancient times. These people didn't care about their comrades' lives, so the only way was to ferret out the leader among them. Indeed, Those 10 over rock wall men who were still alive all stopped their attacks and gathered together as they stared vigilantly at Yi Qing Luo's direction. That rock wall man didn't seem to have expected that he would be suppressed so easily. That red feather fan on his neck seemed to have no lethality at all, but the higher-ups had specially instructed him to be careful of the red feather fan in Yi Qing Luo's hands. The rock wall man didn't dare to move. He didn't say a word, and Yi Qing Luo was neither anxious nor impatient. She calmly flicked her fingers, and the red feather fan cut open the rock wall, which the rock wall man had disguised himself as it stuck close to his skin, leaving a shallow mark. Fresh blood oozed out. There's someone else in the tomb. Who actually entered Ling Ling King's tomb before us? Damn it! Thinking of how dangerous Ling Ling King's tomb was, no one dared to explore, so we didn't send anyone over to guard last night. I didn't expect. Forget it. Let's go over and take a look first. The voices of several people came from the direction of the entrance of the tomb. Their voices weren't soft and sounded extremely spacious. Yi Qing Luo was slightly stunned as a glint flashed past her eyes. The Death God mercenary group's men had arrived. Just as Yi Qing Luo was looking at the tomb entrance, the rock wall man on her wrist took the opportunity when she wasn't prepared and struck towards Yi Qing Luo's chest. Following that, his entire body squatted down. Yi Qing Luo acutely sensed the danger and swiftly evaded, giving the rock wall man a chance to escape. But in a blink of an eye, that bunch of rock wall men drilled into the tomb entrance and disappeared without a trace. Trying to escape. Xiao Jin's expression changed greatly, and he was about to give chase. However, at the corner of the tomb, a group of people walked out and stopped them. A group of about 30 people came over. He was wearing a blue mercenary group uniform. The front and back of the clothes were embroidered with a large kill character using golden thread. Standing at the very front were 2 delicate-looking youths holding night-luminescent pearls. Then there were 3 people with extraordinary auras, 2 men and 1 woman. The expressions on their faces were almost cold. The most eye-catching person was the woman. She was so beautiful that she didn't seem like a mortal at all. Just a single glance at her would cause one to fall head over heels for her. After seeing this lady's looks, that whatever 3 Spring Cities' #1 beauty, Yi Qingqian, whatever Southern Continent's beauty Lanling Nua, had completely turned into dregs. The 2 men by her side, one hot and one cold, were like the woman's guardian deities. Who are you people? Do you know what this place is? Who allowed you to come in? A sharp and rude voice came from behind the 3 men. Yi Qing Luo and the others then discovered that behind those 2 men, there was a 14 to 15-year-old delicate young lady. A series of questions bombarded down, making Yan Xiao Yi, who wasn't in a good mood, frown tightly. We haven't asked who you people are yet. Do you know what place this is? This is a tomb. Don't tell me this is your house, and you don't allow us to enter? The youngsters couldn't help but burst out laughing. These words were simply too sarcastic. Chapter 803. You. The young girl's face sunk as she pointed at Yan Xiao Yi and said angrily, Who do you think you are, to actually dare to humiliate this young lady like this? Do you believe that I won't let my brother kill all of you? When Yan Xiao Yi heard this, she couldn't help but laugh out loud. Her beautiful eyes curved. I've only heard of people relying on their fathers. This is the first time I've heard of someone relying on their brother. I don't have a brother. I'm so scared. Perhaps the girl was well protected and had never been treated like this. With just a few words, the girl's eyes reddened. Xiao Yi. Lin. 2 voices spoke at the same time. It came from Yi Qing Luo and that otherworldly beauty opposite her. Their eyes met, and their gazes met for an instant. Yan Xiao Yi gave a light harumph towards that side and kept her mouth shut as she returned to Yi Qing Luo's side. On the other side, the girl who was called also shrunk back unwillingly. Yi Qing Luo's expression turned slightly chilly as her charming eyes revolved with a chilly glint as she stared fixedly at the two men and one woman. Hand them over. The beautiful woman frowned slightly. Her beautiful face was covered with a layer of worry that made people unable to help but worry. However, the woman's voice was extremely cold. She's just a child who doesn't know any better. Why must you be so overbearing? You know what I'm talking about. Yi Qing Luo's voice was even colder than her, and the sharp glint in her eyes was like a sharp blade. Otherwise, I can suspect that your death god mercenary group is in cahoots with those people. Long Yunjan's expressionless face instantly darkened as his azure blue eyes flickered. You mean, yes. Yi Qing Luo responded calmly as her lips curled into a cold arc. If it wasn't for the appearance of the death god mercenary group, that group of rock wall people wouldn't be able to escape so easily. The beautiful lady's eyes narrowed slightly, but she didn't open her mouth to stop Yi Qing Luo. If that group of rock wall people wants to escape from the tomb, the only exit is the entrance of the tomb. Just now, it was the god-slain mercenary group that came from the entrance. Yi Qing Luo's lips curled into an increasingly chilly arc. As the third place on the honor roll, would the death god mercenary group let off any unknown person who ambushed them? The answer was absolutely impossible. On the other side, the god-slaying mercenary group remained silent. Yi Qing Luo wasn't annoyed as she smiled. I only have two guesses. First, those cliff men are from the god-slaying mercenary group, and the people who attacked us are from the god-slaying mercenary group. Secondly, the death god mercenary group has a close relationship with the cliff people who attacked us. Silently waiting for Yi Qing Luo to finish her sentence, that beautiful lady then curled her red lips and slowly took a step forward. Her attitude was still cold and arrogant. Little girl, since you know who we are, you still dare to point your spear at us. Aren't you worried about affecting your mercenary group? An irrelevant answer. Therefore, he changed the topic. A threat? Yi Qing Luo chuckled. Since the death god mercenary group doesn't dare to deny it, then it means that they have admitted what I said. Since the death god mercenary group has already targeted my group, why should I worry about whether it will affect my group or not? To tell the truth, Yi Qing Luo really hadn't thought about it. He would clash with the killing god mercenary group right from the start. However, thinking about it made sense. She was able to find out from the 3,000 peach blossoms that the death god mercenary group was going to King Ling's tomb for a mission. The death god mercenary group naturally knew that the world group was going to King Ling's tomb for a mission. But what made Yi Qing Luo puzzled was, why was the death god mercenary group's target the profound phoenix ring? Chapter 804. After thinking for a moment, Yi Qing Luo suddenly came up with a guess. Her expression suddenly became dignified and complicated. Who is Yi Feng Ru to your death god mercenary group? This was the only conclusion Yi Qing Luo could come up with. From the beginning, she felt that this seemingly gentle second brother was not as simple as he looked. With just the power of one person, he was able to manage the entire Three Springs sect, and all the expenses were under his control. He was obviously a student of the Heavenly Academy, but he was so low-key that she didn't even know the existence of her second brother in the 2 months she was in the academy. It was enough to show his means. Last night, from the expression of Yi Tianquang, an old grandmadam, she could tell that Yi Feng Ru had not returned home for a long time. In other words, Yi Feng Ru knew that she was at home and deliberately came back. His purpose, in addition to sprinkling the soul-chasing powder on her, was also to confirm the ring on her hand. Clap, clap, clap. A crisp applause came from behind the suicide god mercenary group. Soon after, a slender figure slowly walked out from the crowd. That handsome face that was as gentle as jade. If it wasn't Yi Feng Ru, who else could it be? The corner of his mouth held the usual gentle smile, constantly applauding, a pair of gentle eyes full of smiles. worthy of being my seventh sister. So, quickly guess my identity." Yi Fengru's appearance confirmed that what Yi Qingluo said was all true. Second brother? Yi Fengyu looked at Yi Fengru incredulously, his eyes widened. Yi Fengru smiled. "Eighth brother, long time no see." Yi Fengyu was stunned in place, unable to believe that his gentle and elegant second brother was actually a member of the Death God mercenary group, who was ranked third on the honor list. And he even colluded with the Death God mercenary group to plot against Yi Qingluo. Yi Qingluo looked at him coldly. Her eyes were cold. Does Yi Tianquang know? It seemed that he didn't expect Yi Qingluo to call out Yi Tianquang's name without any scruples. Yi Fengru was slightly startled and immediately laughed out loud. "So what if I know? So what if I don't know?" Father didn't know that the useless daughter he had always looked down on had quietly grown to such an extent. At this point, Yi Fengru's laughter became more and more insolent, and the gloominess in his eyes couldn't be concealed no matter how gentle he was. Holding a fickle weed in your arms like a treasure, but treating a real treasure like a weed. Ha ha ha. This is indeed Lord Father style. Whoever Yi Tianquang likes to treat as a treasure has nothing to do with me. Yi Qingluo snorted coldly. "I'm just curious, why did he make a move on me? If I were to say that I'm simply interested in the ring on seventh sister's finger, would you believe me, seventh sister?" Yi Fengru smiled warmly. The expression on his face had already returned to its usual gentle and calm state. The eyes that looked at Yi Qingluo were filled with sincerity. Yi Qingluo sneered without hesitation. "I don't believe you." "Ha ha ha." Yi Fengru laughed heartily. His chest heaved up and down as he laughed heartily. "Since that's the case, seventh sister, please hand over the profound phoenix ring." He was very direct. "Reason." Yi Qingluo walked slowly to the front of Yi Fengru and stood still. There was no change in the expression on her face. However, Long Yunjian and the others were all nervous. The opponent was a gold-ranked mercenary group. Even if there were only 30 people, they had no chance of winning. What's more, there were definitely many Death God mercenary group outside the tomb. Chapter 805. Seventh sister is still young, such a precious thing. It's better to hand it over to second brother for safekeeping. Yi Fengru's smile was still warm. He stretched out his hand and slowly placed it on Yi Qingluo's shoulder. Like a brother, loving his sister, he patted her on the shoulder, his arm up and down. Yi Qingluo's eyes turned cold, and just as his arm was about to fall, the hand holding the feather fan flipped over and pressed against Yi Fengru's arm. At the same time, Yi Fengru's figure retreated a few steps. That extended arm, the powder hidden in the gaps of his nails, scattered down like smoke. "You dare to poison Qingluo." Qiao Jin's expression was extremely ugly as he clenched the gold coin darts in his hand, as though the moment the command was given he would absolutely fight to the death with the other party. "Poison!" The young mercenaries' expressions changed immediately as they looked at Yi Fengru with vigilance and disgust. Yi Qingluo squinted her eyes in interest. She should be glad that her nose was sensitive, and when she got close to Yi Fengru, she could smell the faint herbal smell on him. This was the herbal smell that an alchemist would have on them. But the smell on Yi Fengru was not like an ordinary alchemist's fragrance, but it was a kind of strange smell. Very faint, almost undetectable. If she didn't guess wrongly, Yi Fengru should not be an orthodox alchemist, but a dark alchemist. The so-called dark alchemist was not like ordinary alchemists who refined those kinds of stabilizing pills to raise their profound grade, heal injuries, etc. What they refined were all kinds of strange and complicated poisons, like soul-chasing powder, corpse-dissolving powder, etc., were all refined by dark alchemists. Seventh sister's reaction is really fast. No wonder eldest sister lost to you. Yi Feng Ru didn't seem to be flustered from being caught red-handed poisoning. He only gave a gentle smile as he wiped off the powder hidden in his fingernails. But no matter how fast Seven Sisters' reaction is, no matter how powerful you are, I'm afraid, you won't be able to fight against 4 people. His tone was gentle and indifferent. Those 30 over Death God Mercenary Group's mercenaries cooperated as they took a step forward. How could Xiao Jin and the rest fall behind as they also took a step forward? Yi Feng Ru swept them a glance as his brows couldn't conceal the disdain in his eyes. Moreover, you still have a bunch of burdens behind you. I'm sure Seventh Sister won't bear for them to get into trouble. Burdens? The young mercenaries' expressions turned extremely ugly as they gritted their teeth and stared at burdens. This seemingly cultured and refined man, why was his words so irritating? Yi, 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 feng, feng, yi, feng, yi, yi. That pair of enchanting and charming eyes, like the bright stars in the sky, flowed with charm. Under the illumination of the luminous pearl, it seemed to flow with an extremely captivating charm. Even Yi Fengru was momentarily absent-minded. His gentle brows overflowed with gloominess as he lost his patience. Second brother is only advising Seventh Sister. A wise man submits to circumstances to save yourself unnecessary trouble. If we were to start a fight, where are you injured and how many of you die, Seventh Sister will feel heartache. Isn't that so? Yi Qing Luo seemed as though she had heard a joke, as her slender fingers covered her pink lips, as her long and narrow eyes outlined a sneer of ridicule. Second brother, did you really think that only you know how to poison? She, who was under ghost doctor's tutelage and had the 100-pill refining ability, wasn't some orthodox alchemist. She had dabbled in stabilizing pills or poisons and the like. Chapter 806. Looking at Yi Qing Luo's smiling face, Yi Fengru's gentle pupils suddenly widened. As though he was struck by lightning, he froze on the spot. The next second, Yi Fengru's hand covered his chest as his face turned pale, as his slender body staggered and fell backwards. Ru! Fengru! Brother Ru! The 3 people behind, upon sensing Yi Fengru's abnormal state, immediately rushed up to support him. Yi Qing Luo, what did you do to Brother Ru? The young lady's hands hugged Yi Fengru's arm tightly. Her face was filled with hatred and resentment towards Yi Qing Luo. Yi Qing Luo raised her brows, her fingertips brushed past her chin. Her pink lips moved slightly as she said word by word, just giving her a taste of her own medicine. I believe, with second brother's ability, it should be no problem to cure this poison. Yi Fengru's breathing suddenly became hurried. The muscles on his face were trembling slightly. The 5 fingers which were pressed on his chest gradually tightened, clenching into a fist shape. The green veins were already bulging. Cure? If he could cure this poison, he wouldn't be in such a sorry state. Yi Fengru only felt a sudden numbing feeling in his heart, followed by a sharp pain as though it was being pierced by needles. Before he could adapt to this pain, his heart suddenly inflated, as though it was about to explode any time. Yi Fengru had refined poison for more than 10 years, but had never met such a strange poison. The more he thought, the more obvious the swelling feeling in his heart became. His entire face was twisted, as his hands were clenched tightly in extreme pain. That young lady's eyes were red, as big beads of tears flowed down. Brother Ru! Brother Ru! The beautiful lady's eyes were cold, as she looked at Yi Qing Luo coldly. Hand over the antidote! Since I'm going to die anyway, why don't I drag you all to accompany me in death? Yi Qing Luo smiled charmingly. You all think that you're so smart, but it's just the remaining tricks that I'm playing. What was a wise man submits to circumstances. If she really handed over the profound Phoenix Ring, would the Death God Mercenary Group really let them off? Yi Fengru knew the origin of the profound Phoenix Ring, so naturally he knew the original owner of this ring. Yi Feng-ru did not dare to offend Dmo Xian. Furthermore, they had to maintain the reputation of the Death God mercenary group. Once their objective was achieved, none of the world group would be able to escape. Yi Qingluo was tired of playing this kind of lousy tricks in her past life. Yi Feng-ru coaxed her like she was a child. "You." The young lady's eyes were red as she clenched her fists tightly. She was so angry that her whole body was trembling, but she couldn't do anything to Yi Qingluo. These 2 men and 1 woman were obviously the core members of the Death God mercenary group. They were extremely concerned about Yi Feng-ru. This also meant that Yi Feng-ru's position in the Death God mercenary group was not low, and he was brothers who had gone through fire and water with these core members. This knowledge made Yi Qingluo heave a sigh of relief. Yi Feng-ru's life was in her hands. The Death God mercenary group would temporarily not make a move on them. The 2 groups of people faced each other, and no one moved. Only Yi Feng-ru's increasingly ragged breathing and his pained voice resounded in the spacious tomb. The more she listened, the sadder she cried. The 2 men and 1 woman's expressions turned uglier by the minute. As though there was no other way, one of the delicate-looking men opened his mouth with a steely green face. "The world group. We'll let you leave. Hand over the antidote." "Did I say that I'm leaving?" Yi Qingluo's eyes curved as she smiled in an extremely casual manner. The beautiful lady's willowy brows creased into a bundle. "Don't push your luck." Chapter 807. His words caused those people to choke, their expressions unsightly, but they had no way to retort. Yi Qingluo's gaze lightly swept past Yi Feng-ru, whose face was filled with pain. Her gaze was indifferent, totally not like she was looking at her second brother, but an insignificant stranger. She didn't care whether he lived or died. The few people in the Death God mercenary group didn't dare to use Yi Feng-ru's life to bet if Yi Qingluo really didn't care about him, this second brother. Recalling the time when he was in the dark, he saw Yi Qingluo expressionlessly slit the neck of the stone wall man. His technique was skillful and his expression was cold. It was completely unlike the emotions a 15-year-old girl should have. At this moment, the god-slaying mercenary group only felt that this lady was too cold-blooded. He was so cold-blooded that he couldn't feel any emotion from her. After a long time, the beautiful woman lowered her eyes and looked at Yi Feng-ru, who was leaning against her arm. She opened her mouth and said, "What do you want?" "Mission." Yi Qingluo replied simply, "I need the Death God mercenary group to help us complete the mission." The Death God mercenary group did not participate in the random missions, but they were aware of the situation of this event. The Matter of the World group, drawing a random scroll which had never appeared in all these years, had already spread throughout the entire mercenary world. "What kind of mission did you draw for the tomb of the Ling King? Guard the Zombie King." Yi Qingluo didn't hide anything. She had originally planned to borrow the strength of the Death God mercenary group to see if they could complete the mission. Now that such a good opportunity had been presented to her, how could she reject it? Guardian Zombie King? The expressions of the 2 men and 1 woman instantly turned ashen. They looked at each other and frowned. Up until now, no one has been able to enter the deeper layers of the tomb. The place guarding the Corpse Kings is in front of the tomb's main tomb. Even we can't reach that place. You don't need to tell me whether or not you can do it." Yi Qingluo replied coldly, "My motive is to guard the Corpse King. You only need to tell me to go or not." The beautiful woman's exquisite and beautiful face was slightly twisted. The 3 of them looked at each other for a long time without saying anything. They were probably using the mercenary group's emblem to communicate with each other internally. Yi Qingluo didn't rush them as she quietly waited for their decision. Not long later, the beautiful lady's face sunk as she looked at Yi Qingluo. "All right, I represent the Death God mercenary group to agree to your request. Now can you help Ru to detoxify the poison?" Yi Feng-ru, who was leaning on the woman's arm, couldn't help but tremble. It was clear that he couldn't find anything strange in Yi Fengru's body, even with his profound qi. However, Yi Fengru was in so much pain that he had already lost consciousness. Looking at Yi Qingluo's confident look, it was obvious that only Yi Qingluo could cure this poison. The more the young girl thought about it, the angrier she became. Her eyes were filled with disgust and mockery. I really don't know what your heart is made of. You can even kill your second brother and use him to threaten us. Yi Qingluo's eyes narrowed as her lips twitched coldly as she sneered in disdain. Kitty Li was leaning on Yi Qingluo's side, and when she heard the young lady's words, she was instantly infuriated as her quick-witted eyes stared fiercely at the person opposite. He was obviously the one who struck first. He's allowed to lay a vicious hand on his own sister, but elder sister isn't allowed to retaliate? Saying that, she took a step forward and raised her hand fiercely. I'll give you a slap, and you're not allowed to retaliate. Chapter 808. Kitty. Yi Qingluo calmly called out to Kitty Li. Kitty Li winked at that young lady and gave a heavy harumph. When she turned back to look at Yi Qingluo, her face was already smiling sweetly like a child. Yi Qingluo pulled Kitty Li behind her and shot a glance at the solemn-looking man's hand as she smiled calmly. Azura Group leader must be careful. If you hurt any part of my brother, I will leave it untouched and let my dear brother suffer the same injury. The man's tightly clenched hand suddenly loosened. A pair of sharp eyes stared coldly at Yi Qingluo, as though he wanted to see through her eyes, to see through her soul. However, the man only saw an endless whirlpool in that pair of deep pupils. Just a little more and he would have fallen into that whirlpool, unable to climb out. Both parties reached an agreement. Yi Qingluo wasn't that silly to help Yi Fengru detoxify the poison. She only helped Yi Fengru to alleviate the pain in his heart. Every 2 hours, Yi Fengru would once again experience the excruciating pain that pierced his heart and bones. Azura Mercenary Group was naturally infuriated, but there was nothing they could do. After Yi Fengru regained consciousness, he found out that Azura Mercenary Group had signed an agreement with Yi Qingluo because of him. He clutched his heart, and the moment he thought of that swelling pain earlier, his body couldn't help but tremble slightly, which had already formed an instinctive fear. Yi Fengru had just stood up with the help of 2 men. When he raised his eyes, he met with a pair of beautiful, smiling faces. The young lady's smile was enchanting. Her long and narrow eyes were extremely charming. Her pink lips opened and closed. Her sweet voice, word by word, was clearly transmitted into his ears. Thank you, second brother, for your advice. If it wasn't for Yi Fengru, Yi Qingluo would definitely not use such means to threaten the Azura Mercenary Group to cooperate. Yi Fengru heard the sarcasm in Yi Qingluo's words, and his body trembled, almost falling onto the ground. This completely explained what was called moving a rock to smash one's own feet. After signing the agreement, Yi Qingluo also found out that the solemn Azura Mercenary Group leader was called Nangong Firen. That delicate-looking man was called Wei Beilai, the Azura Mercenary Group's executive group leader. The beautiful woman was called Zi Qianchan, and she was the vice captain of the Azura Group. The 14-year-old girl was Nangong Firen's twin sister, Nangong Lin. She wasn't a mercenary of the god-slaying mercenary group. She just followed them to gain some experience. After understanding everything, Yi Fengru was well rested and could move on his own. The 2 groups of people headed into the depths of the tomb, one after the other. Yi Qingluo made the Azura Group walk in front to open up the path, while they followed closely behind about 20 steps to the left. Qingluo, can they be trusted? Xiao Jin's brows creased as he used the mercenary group badge to transmit his voice. Yi Qingluo's lips curled into a cold arc. Untrustworthy, but there is still value in using him. With just their strength, it was likely that they would not be able to pass through the layers of traps and formations in the tomb and reach the main tomb. Before Yi Fengru could find a way to save himself, the god-slaying mercenary group could only fulfill their deal. Everyone be careful, in case these hypocrites do something secretly, Yi Qingluo reminded them. The god-slaying mercenary group had always been ranked third on the honor board, so naturally they were arrogant and proud. So how would they be willing to lower their status to deal with these youngsters? Especially when they were threatened by a bunch of youngsters who totally didn't put them in their eyes. It was inevitable that they would use the same method to threaten them. If Yi Fengru had poisoned her brother, Yi Qingluo couldn't guarantee that she had all the antidotes on her. Just as she was saying that, the god-slaying mercenary group, who were 20 steps away, suddenly shouted angrily, "Not good! There's a riot in the tomb." Immediately following that, the 30 over god-slaying mercenary group's mercenaries turned around and swarmed towards them. The World Group's youngsters were immediately on high alert as they displayed a defensive formation. Suddenly, a deafening sound rang out beside his ear. Chapter 809. The entire tomb started to shake violently. Pieces of gravel started to fall from the surrounding steep rock walls. Nangong Firen was running at the forefront, and on seeing this bunch of young mercenaries still standing there foolishly blocking the way, she angrily shouted, "Get lost! Do you want to die here?" As the ground shook, cracks began to appear on it. The young mercenaries still didn't move as they supported each other and stood on the same spot, waiting for Yi Qingluo's instructions. Towards danger, Yi Qingluo had an instinctive sense. When the tomb started to shake violently, Yi Qingluo felt an unprecedented sense of panic. Faintly, there was an intense scorching feeling surging from her profound jade heart. This scorching feeling wasn't the same as when she was probing other people's profound jade, heart grade, or profound grade, but it was a kind of, like a raging fire was lingering around her profound jade heart, as though there was an intense reaction. Yi Qingluo suppressed this discomfort as her gaze swept across the Azura god group, who had already flocked over. Her face turned slightly pale as she berated sternly, "Idiots! If you don't want to die, don't run over here." The tomb's ground had already cracked, and the surrounding rock walls had fallen into gravel. If they were to move swiftly now, it would only cause the tomb to collapse. Now they were only at the periphery of King Ling's tomb, and this place was the easiest to collapse. If it was as expected, the entrance of the tomb had already been blocked by the collapsed boulders. The Azura god group's people actually made such a huge commotion as they tried to run back. Wouldn't it accelerate the shaking of the tomb's periphery, which was originally on the verge of collapse? When had the Azura god group ever been scolded as idiots? And it was even scolded by a young lass, so how could they feel at ease? Get lost! The Azura god group had already rushed over to their side as Nangong Firen bellowed with a steely green face, "You're hopelessly stupid." Yi Qingluo took a step back as she avoided Nangong Firen's outstretched hand. This action made the scorching feeling in her chest become even more intense. She could even feel that there was a ball of extremely vigorous flame burning in her heart. Rumble! Just at this moment, the place where they were standing shook violently as the ground collapsed. Everyone's feet were on empty ground as their bodies rapidly fell downwards. Everyone's faces were filled with shock and fear. Only Yi Qingluo shut her eyes tightly as her face overflowed with pain. Her slender, white little hand firmly pressed down on her profound heart jade. For some reason, she felt as if there was a voice by her ear, constantly calling out to her. However, she could not hear the summoning words clearly. Yi Qingluo and the others were in the tomb and didn't know that the entire outside the tomb was filled with dark clouds, gloomy and gloomy. In the air, there was a suffocating chill. From time to time, lightning flashed, thunder roared, and wind and clouds rose. A powerful storm current rushed into the sky from the center of the tomb. However, in an instant, the storm dissipated into thin air and disappeared. The imperial palace. This strong movement made DMO Xian, who was bending over the table and handling some matters, frowned. As he stood up, his gorgeous purple robe fluttered in the wind. His black hair cascaded over his shoulders like clouds and smoke. His slender figure was smooth and incomparably breathtaking. However, the man's peerlessly handsome face and his long and narrow obsidian-like black eyes clearly had a faint demonic charm. But at this moment there was a thick and cold glint. Chapter 8:10. The moment the World Group's mercenaries fell. Under Yi Qing Luo's instructions, they used their profound qi to lighten their bodies and finally landed stably on the ground. As for the Azure Group, they were not so lucky. The sudden collapse made them unable to react for a moment. When Nangong Firen and the others saw Yi Qing Luo and the others' actions, they immediately released their profound qi, totally disregarding their own group members. When the group of people stood firmly on the ground, there were no casualties on the World Group's side. As for the God Killer Group, 2 members had fallen to their deaths, and there were more than 10 who had hurriedly released their qi when they landed. But in the situation of being too flustered, they had injured their legs. Where are we? Nan Gonglin, who was hiding behind Nangong Firen, asked in a trembling voice. Nangong Firen's face was ashen, and she did not reply. The 2 mercenary groups had met with an accident at the same time, but on their side there were casualties and injuries. On the contrary, the brat mercenary group that they looked down upon was unscathed, and they began to adapt to the current situation in an orderly manner. How could he, the leader of the gold mercenary group, endure this? Captain, Yi Fengru's expression didn't look any better. The night-luminescent pearls in their hands had fallen somewhere, and the surroundings were dark. Don't speak. Yi Qing Luo suppressed her voice as she spoke in a deep and cold voice. Xiao Yi, where's the luminous pearl? As Yen Xiao Yi and Xiao Jin were falling, they quickly kept the luminous pearl into their space pockets. In a place like the tomb, the luminous pearl was their only source of light. Hearing Yi Qing Luo's question, Yen Xiao immediately took out the luminous pearl. The surroundings were faintly discernible under the illumination of the luminous pearls. Then, Xiao Jin also took out his night-luminescent pearl. The surrounding environment was gradually reflected in everyone's eyes. This was a bottomless tunnel. It was extremely spacious, about the width of 10 adults walking side by side. The air was cold and damp, and there were even green vines growing on the walls. Touching it with his hand, it felt sticky and disgusting. This should be the middle layer of the Ling King's tomb. Yi Qing Luo carefully sized up the surroundings. From the emptiness of the voice and the circulation of the air, he could roughly tell. Yi Qing Luo's slender brows creased tightly. The Ling King's tomb had always been the most secure place, and most people would not enter it. How could the periphery of the tomb collapse? That kind of collapse was like a sudden earthquake. Then the entire tomb began to crack and finally collapsed. Completely, it did not seem like a natural collapse. Instead, it was a collapse caused by the depths of the tomb. Could it be that someone had entered the tomb before them, or even reached the lowest level of the tomb, and then triggered some sort of mechanism that caused the tomb to collapse? How do you know that this is the middle level of the Ling King's tomb? Zi Qianqian's beautiful eyes stared coldly at Yi Qing Luo as a glint of jealousy flashed past her eyes. Ever since Yi Qing Luo appeared, her beauty and her ability seemed to have been crushed by Yi Qing Luo till she had no way to retaliate. Zi Qianqian, who had always been the center of attention, could not tolerate another existence that was even more dazzling than her. Yi Qing Luo totally didn't bother about Zi Qianqian's question, as she concentrated all her attention on the surrounding environment. Zi Qianqian's face darkened, and an embarrassed look appeared on his face. He arrogantly raised his head and lightly snorted. You really think that you are the backbone of the group? You casually order others around and spout nonsense. Do you take us for fools? Chapter 8:11. You. Don't be in a hurry to deny it. Yi Qing Luo glanced at her coldly and in the tranquil and strange tomb. The gaze seemed especially eerie. Immediately after that, Yi Qing Luo turned her head around and continued looking at the direction where the green vines were growing as she said, "Now, the one who is at a disadvantage is not us, the world group." This sentence successfully made Zi Qianqian shut his mouth unwillingly. Indeed, no matter if it was facing a sudden danger situation, they weren't able to be as calm and composed as Yi Qing Luo, accurately giving out instructions. It was their own group members who were able to make the most correct decision under the circumstances where they didn't have any instructions. They couldn't even match up to the world group. They suddenly understood why the world group was able to advance to a bronze plate mercenary group within a day, if they were allowed to develop. In future, there would definitely be a spot for them on the Mercenary Association's honor board. Nan Gongfiren's expression instantly congealed as she glanced sideways at Yi Fengru. Yi Fengru's face was pale as he shook his head. He didn't know when his cowardly and incompetent seventh sister had become so bold and courageous. Bones. Bones. Human bones. Suddenly, a sharp shriek exploded from the crowd. Nan Gonglin was hysterically hugging her head as she recklessly charged over. Her petite body crashed into Yi Fengru's arms as her arms wrapped tightly around Yi Fengru's waist. "Brother Ru, these are all dead people's bones." "Boo-hoo, boo-hoo." Although Yi Fengru had slowed down the poison in his body, but Yi Qing Luo hadn't cleared it for him. Now that he was knocked into by Nan Gonglin, Yi Fengru felt a piercing pain in his heart. Although it was short, but that piercing pain made Yi Fengru feel a chill down his spine. Without thinking, he directly pushed Nan Gonglin away. Nan Gonglin was unsteady as she was pushed onto the ground as both her hands stabbed into the sharp rocks on the ground. Missy's delicate skin was instantly melted by the rocks as red blood seeped out. Blood! Yi Qing Luo's expression instantly turned gloomy as she berated sternly, "Block up the blood!" This is a tomb, and human blood is the easiest to attract yin qi. The young lady was in so much pain that her tears kept flowing, but she didn't forget to raise her head, wanting to argue with Yi Qing Luo. But the minute she met Yi Qing Luo's pair of chilly charming eyes, she was frightened by her imposing manner and didn't dare to say a single word as she directly pounced into Nan Gongfiren's arms, crying out in a low voice. Nan Gongfiren frowned and glanced at Yi Fengru coldly. He saw Yi Fengru clutching his heart with a pained expression on his face, as if he hadn't noticed his gaze at all. Nan Gongfiren frowned and looked away. He quickly took out a handkerchief and stopped the bleeding on Nan Gonglin's palm. Nan Gonglin was still trembling, and tears streamed down her face. It was hard to tell if it was because of the pain or because she was sad that Yi Fengru had pushed her away. Over the years, thousands of grave robbers and mercenaries have come, but the furthest mercenary group has only reached the middle layer of the tomb. This is enough to show how dangerous the tomb is. Yi Qing Luo's voice was extremely cold and calm as she walked slowly to the corpse's bones, which had caused Nan Gonglin to scream earlier. Under the illumination of the luminous pearl, there were about 100 sets of human bones. Perhaps it was because of the passage of time. Many of the white bones had already shattered, and the layers of white bones looked extremely eerie and terrifying. Yi Qing Luo squatted down expressionlessly as she scrutinized those human bones and continued. The number of tomb robbers or mercenaries who died in Ling Ling King's tomb is uncountable, so it's not strange to see human bones. Chapter 812. Even for these mercenaries who had been through hundreds of battles and were used to seeing blood and killing, when they saw the hundreds of broken bones piled up, they were somewhat horrified. Even if they weren't horrified, they weren't able to be like Yi Qing Luo, looking at those bones expressionlessly, or even using her feet to lift the bones. The bones shattered upon contact. The shattering sound was extremely ear-piercing in the quiet tomb, making one's heart palpitate. Yi Qing Luo was only a 15-year-old young lady. How could she be fearless when facing these eerie white bones? A real 15-year-old girl's way of opening up the eerie, white bones should be like Nangong Lin's. This should be a mercenary group who came to the Ling King's tomb to complete a mission. They must have touched some array in the tomb or attracted the corpse chi, causing all of them to lose their lives here. Yi Qing Luo played it down as she stood up and gazed ahead. Since we've reached the middle layer, then let's head straight to the main tomb. Nangong Lin buried her head in Nangong Firen's arms as she raised her head and cried, "I'm not going. I don't want to go." After seeing so many white bones, Nangong Lin, who had never met with any danger, was so terrified that her limbs had turned stiff. Yi Qing Luo merely swept a glance at them as her lips curled into a chilly smile. "Of course, you can choose not to follow us. If my second brother's poison acts up, then don't blame me for not abiding by our deal." Nangong Firen and Zi Qianqian instantly stared at Yi Qing Luo angrily. I don't have the time to waste with you guys here." Yi Qing Luo called out to her brothers as she walked straight ahead. It was silent in front of them. The long and deep tunnel was pitch black with no end in sight. Nangong Firen and the others were still standing at the same spot. He glanced sideways at Yi Fengru as he frowned and asked in a deep voice, "Can you cure this poison?" Yi Fengru didn't reply, but the sound of his teeth clenching and his pale face had already replaced all the answers. Nangong Firen's brows creased even tighter as a cold glint shot out from his eyes. "Then we must follow you to the main tomb." The coldness in his words made Yi Fengru's face turn paler. Nangong Firen was blaming him. In other words, Nangong Firen was displeased when he pushed Nangong Lin's lower body. Yi Fengru wanted to explain, but he didn't know how to start. If it wasn't for the fact that he didn't have enough ability, if it wasn't for the fact that he had underestimated Yi Qing Luo's ability and heartlessness, then he wouldn't have shot himself in the foot, and wouldn't have ended up being used as a tool by Yi Qing Luo to threaten him. Just then, a gust of chilly wind blew over. Nangong Lin's entire body was trembling, and tears were already flowing out of her eyes. "I don't dare. Brother, let's leave the tomb. Let's go home." Nangong Firen gently patted the woman in her arms and sighed helplessly. "Lin, I'm here. If we leave and your brother Ru is poisoned, you'll cry again. Nangong Lin recalled Yi Fengru's pained expression, and her whimpering stopped. He couldn't bear to see Fengru suffer, but if they followed that arrogant woman, it was very likely that they would also become one of the millions of bones. While they were discussing, Yi Qing Luo and the rest had already walked far away. The luminous pearls light gradually went further away, and the tunnel which they were in became pitch black and dim. Not long later, they couldn't even see the expressions of the people around them clearly. Chapter 813. Looking at the pitch-black surroundings, Nangong Firen clenched his fists tightly as he hugged Nangong Lin tightly and gave an order, "Follow up!" Now, they could only follow the world group. In this pitch-black abyss, they who didn't know where they were in the King Ling's tomb could only follow the world group to find a chance to exit. Moreover, their mission target was in the middle layer of the King Ling's tomb. The world group wanted to make use of them. So why didn't they make use of them instead? The world group's youngsters followed behind Yi Qing Luo in an orderly manner. Zhao Bo turned back from time to time to take a look at the Death God mercenary group, who were still at the original spot with a puzzled expression. "Vice group leader, are we really going to leave them here?" If they had the Death God mercenary group's help, it should be much safer for them to walk around the King Ling's tomb. Vice group leader had signed a deal with the Death God mercenary group. Wasn't it to make use of them? Yi Qing Luo shot a glance at him with a smile which didn't look like a smile. "They will follow up." Zhao Bo didn't believe it. A gold-ranked mercenary group on the honor board had been humiliated to such a state by a mere bronze-ranked mercenary group. As long as the Death God mercenary group had some backbone, they wouldn't possibly continue to trade with them. However, This thought had just flashed past Zhao Bo's mind when he heard a series of orderly footsteps. Turning back, he indeed saw Nangong Firen leading 30 over mercenaries, following them in quick steps. Zhao Bo was stunned as he looked at Nangong Firen in puzzlement. He has no other choice but to choose us. After a few words of interaction, Yi Qing Luo could roughly understand Nangong Firen and the other's character. Nangong Firen was someone who cared about the big picture and wouldn't be tied down just because of a small matter. Moreover, the poison in Yi Fengru's body was something that only she could cure. Towards the Death God mercenary group, following them, the World Group's mercenaries didn't open their mouths to tease or ridicule them. They only followed Yi Qing Luo solemnly. The group of them remained silent as they followed closely behind. The deeper they went, the colder they felt. Under the luminous pearl's glow, the air seemed to be lingering with a thin layer of fog. It was the kind of gloomy fog. It was grayish and extremely terrifying. Everyone stepped on the gravel, and the sound was especially ear-piercing under the silent and strange atmosphere. Every sound was like something was ruthlessly pounding on their hearts. He felt an inexplicable palpitation and nervousness. The expressions of the mercenaries of the Azura team became more and more solemn. Their footsteps also gradually became extremely heavy. Nangong Firen also felt the atmosphere as she looked at the expressionless and silent youths of the World Group. She clenched her teeth and berated them from the Mercenary Guild badge. Keep your spirits up. You are the elite mercenaries of the Gold Mercenary Group. Don't tell me they can't compare to those bronze plate mercenaries who haven't even grown their hair yet. The mercenaries of the Killing God Guild were scolded badly. Under the glory of the Gold Mercenary Group, they were used to being arrogant and competitive. Naturally, they were not willing to admit that they were inferior to these bronze plate brats. However, in the strange and dangerous tomb of the Ling King, there was an unknown danger ahead. They had no idea what would happen in the next second. How could he not be afraid? Looking at the fearless young faces of the world mercenaries, he could only attribute their fearlessness to the fact that they didn't know what kind of dangerous place the Ling King's tomb was. Chapter 814. The group of them had walked for an unknown period of time, and even for these cultivators who had been practicing martial arts for many years, they could feel the fatigue in their legs. The seemingly bottomless tunnel finally showed some changes. The further they walked, the narrower the tunnel became. From the original 6 to 7 people walking side by side, they gradually shifted backwards, and finally it became Yi Qing Luo who was walking at the front, forming a straight line. Yi Qing Luo's heart, which was hanging in the air, also sunk slightly. Earlier, based on the direction of the green vine's growth, Yi Qing Luo had determined the direction which led to the bottom of King Ling's tomb. After walking for such a long time, she started to doubt her own judgment. Finally, she saw the change in the shape of the road, which proved that her determination of the direction was not wrong. This kind of narrow road, after walking for about an incense's time, there was a stone wall in front, and there was no other path. Yi Qing Luo stood in front of the stone wall and was sizing it up when a young lady's barbaric voice was heard from afar. "Hey, do you know how to lead the way or not? This is basically a dead end." Along the way, Nangong Lin could no longer hold back the anger which had accumulated in her heart. Now, on seeing Yi Qing Luo leading a dead end, the disgust in her heart gushed out. A small mercenary group is just a small mercenary group, totally ignorant. You chose this path so casually that I really thought you were sure that this was the exit. You dare to randomly choose a path in the tomb. It's still all right if you meet a dead end, but if you meet with other mechanisms or arrays and cause us to get injured, you will be a sinner. All these knowledge were what Nangong Firen was worried that Nangong Lin would be afraid along the way. So as they walked, she softly taught her some common knowledge on going out for experience learning. Nangong Lin was rather smart, and after she memorized all these, it was just the right time to give Yi Qing Luo a tight slap on her face. Yi Qing Luo totally ignored Nangong Lin's hooting as her gaze was still on the stone wall, as her half-squinted eyes revealed some seriousness. Seeing Yi Qing Luo keeping silent, Nan Gonglin became even more complacent as her voice rose by a few notches. The world group's trash. If you want to leave the tomb alive, you'd better follow my brother obediently. Just based on the few of you empty shells, I'm afraid you won't be able to leave even after another 500 years. Nan Gongfiren frowned and pulled her sister into her arms. Although she sounded like she was blaming Nan Gonglin, she didn't explain what Nan Gonglin had just said. In other words, Nan Gongfiren agreed with Nan Gonglin. Yi Qing Luo originally didn't want to bother about Nan Gonglin. However, the words that Nan Gonglin said had angered her. His protective heart was immediately filled with anger. She slowly turned around, her gaze as cold as a torch. There were dozens of people between the two of them, but unfortunately, when Yi Qing Luo's gaze fell onto Nan Gonglin felt a chill running down her spine as her entire body started to tremble. Following that, they heard Yi Qing Luo's cold and indifferent voice rang in the spacious tomb. If you're really that powerful, just leave. There's no need to follow us. You. Nan Gonglin flew into a rage out of humiliation as she struggled free from Nan Gongfiren's arm and pointed at Yi Qing Luo as she berated. If it wasn't for the fact that you, this vicious and evil woman, had poisoned Brother Ru, would we even care about following you? Oh, Yi Qing Luo's brows rose as the smile in her eyes turned colder. Then ask your brother, if my second brother wasn't poisoned, would he choose to form an alliance? Yi Qing Luo intentionally used the word form an alliance. She was giving Nan Gongfiren a way out. Enough. Nan Gongfiren naturally wouldn't answer this question as he directly grabbed Nan Gonglin's arm and stared at her, indicating for her to shut up. Chapter 8:15. Yi Qing Luo retracted her vision as her gaze fell onto the stone wall. This tunnel, there are only two ways to choose. Even if this side is unable to lead to the bottom of the tomb, at most we can just turn back and choose the other side to continue walking. Her tone was light and casual. The Azura group's mercenaries felt that it was especially piercing to their ears. What was called, at most we can just turn back? This kind of gloomy place, to walk all the way here, was already an extremely strong test to their souls. Going back and forth was simply a waste of time. Towards the Azura group's dissatisfaction, Yi Qing Luo turned a deaf ear to it. Her attention was completely placed on the stone wall. The top of the surrounding stone walls were covered with green vines and moss. Only the stone wall. Although it looked gray and unremarkable, but there wasn't any vines or moss on the stone wall. After gazing for a long time, Yi Qing Luo raised her hand, and the red feather fan in her fingertips gently touched the stone wall. With just a slight touch, perhaps it was because there wasn't anyone around for a long time and it was corroded by the corpse chi, the broken stones which were attached to the stone wall started to roll down. Yi Qing Luo retreated a few steps, and when those broken stones were about to fall, she then congealed her profound chi and swept up a whirlwind, sweeping all the broken stones above the stone wall. After the broken stones had fallen, the gray stone wall was clearly reflected in everyone's eyes. That stone wall was suffused with a lifeless black-red color, which was extremely strange. What made one's heart tremble was the totem drawn on the stone wall. That was a man holding a long spear, dressed in battle armor. He should be a peerless hero with a valiant and imposing manner. However, that totem seemed to be covered with fresh blood, looking extremely sinister and terrifying. This is war god Ling Wang. Yi Qing Luo narrowed her eyes as she sized up the totem in detail. To be able to carve a human-shaped totem on the stone wall of Ling Wang's tomb. Other than Ling Wang, there shouldn't be anyone else. Nan Gongfiren had already led Zi Qianchan and the others past the world group and walked next to Yi Qing Luo. After seeing the totem on the stone wall, Nan Gonglin gave a shrill cry as she pounced into Nan Gongfiren's arms. Zi Qianqian and Yi Fengru's expressions were slightly grave as they exchanged glances. Could it be? Ling Wang's main tomb is behind the stone wall? Impossible. Yi Qingluo interrupted their guesses without any hesitation. Zi Qianqian's brows instantly knitted together as her beautiful face was filled with displeasure. Vice Group Leader of the World Group, aren't you a little too conceited? They were a dignified gold medal mercenary group, yet they were repeatedly led by a bronze medal mercenary group. Right from the start, it was Yi Qingluo who was in charge of everything. This kind of feeling made them feel very uncomfortable. According to the information on the tomb of the Lai Ling King, the tomb of the Lai Ling King is guarded by a formation. Yi Qingluo lightly lifted her eyelids. If Azura God Group's Vice Group Leader hadn't investigated the mission's information clearly before setting off for the mission, why not take this opportunity to read through the information on Ling Ling King's tomb, in case you make a fool out of yourself? Zi Qianqian's face immediately turned red, and Yi Qingluo's words made the hearts of the other mercenaries jump abruptly. These youths had investigated the tomb of the Ling King beforehand. In other words, they knew exactly how dangerous the tomb was. They didn't even have the courage of a few young mercenaries. These gold medal mercenaries' pride had suffered a huge blow. Unknowingly, they all puffed out their chests, as no one was willing to admit that they couldn't be compared to a bronze medal mercenary. Yi Qingluo's eyes suddenly flashed as she raised her hand and touched the totem on the stone wall. Chapter 816. She had finally snatched back the leading rights. Nangong Firen's eyes were masked with disdain. Bronze plates were bronze plates, no matter how shocking their performance was. It couldn't change the fact that they lacked experience. So what if they had checked the information of King Ling's tomb? Wouldn't they still commit the lowest level mistake? Nangong Firen gave a light harumph as he took a big stride forward and raised his hand to stop her. But before Nangong Firen's hand stretched out, Yi Qingluo's finger had already pressed onto the head of King Ling's totem. Her slender, jade-like fingers, under the contrast of blood, looked extremely fair. A loud boom, boom, boom was heard as that stone wall shook slightly. Everyone felt that the entire tunnel was shaking. Nangong Firen's hand also retracted back because of the shaking as he hugged Nangong Lin tightly. Nangong Lin had taken a trip to the gates of hell because of the earthquake outside the tomb. Now that she felt the ground beneath her feet shaking, she couldn't help but let out a wah-wah scream. The entire tunnel was long and serene. Nangong Lin's screams reverberated. While everyone was in a fluster, their heads were in extreme pain from the shaking. "Shut up!" Yi Qingluo's voice was cold and dignified. Two casual words caused Nangong Lin's voice to stop abruptly. By the time Nangong Lin realized that she was so obedient, her face flushed red as she gritted her teeth and was about to scold Yi Qingluo. But all the words were stuck at the side of her mouth. That stone wall in front of them started to move towards the right at an extremely slow speed. Like an old machine which hadn't been moved for a long time, it gave off an ear-piercing friction sound. That swaying feeling earlier was caused by the stone wall's movement. Realizing this, everyone's uneasy hearts finally calmed down. After the stone wall opened up, an extremely smelly, moldy smell came gushing out, together with a thick stench. The two smells blended together in an extremely strange manner. This smell, as compared to the World Group's mercenaries when they first entered the tomb, was much thicker by 1,000 times. Azura Group's mercenaries immediately held onto the stone wall, which was filled with vines, as they bent down and vomited. On the contrary, the World Group's mercenaries followed behind Yi Qingluo without a change in expression. As one after another, they walked into the stone wall which was opened up. It was as if he could not smell the disgusting and unbearable stench at all. Nangong Firen's face was ashen, and he looked as though he was about to vomit. He glared at the young mercenaries with his cold and sinister eyes. Swish! A shiny object was thrown in a beautiful arc in the air toward Nangong Firen. Nangong Firen stretched out his arm and caught the item. Opening his palm, he saw a palm-sized white jade bottle lying on his palm. It was still emitting a refreshing medicinal fragrance, which diluted the unpleasant fishy smell in his nose. Is this the quality of a gold-ranked mercenary group? Before doing the mission, you don't know how to investigate the specific background and information of the mission. You also don't know how to prepare the things you need to prepare according to the mission location. Yi Qing Luo's lips twitched in ridicule as her eyes couldn't conceal the contempt. Gold, ranked mercenary group. Ranked third on the honor list. It's really hard for me not to doubt the authenticity of your mercenary group. You, what do you know? Nangong Lin's face flushed red as she roared furiously. On what basis do you doubt the Azura group? If you have the ability, then compete with my brother. Use your ability to speak. Nangong Lin's words had just finished roaring when Nangong Firen tugged her arm, shaking her head at her. Chapter 817. Facing Yi Qing Luo's disdain and ridicule, Nangong Firen was filled with rage. But he couldn't utter a single word of rebuttal, because every single word that Yi Qing Luo said was the truth. The bottle was filled with air-freshening pills. There were more than 50 refreshing pills. No wonder, after they found out that the World Group had drawn a random mission, which was the Ling King's tomb mission, they waited in the tomb for a few hours, but the World Group didn't appear. The mercenaries of the World Group weren't like other mercenary groups. In order to complete the mission as soon as possible, after learning the location of the mission, he madly rushed to the destination. The World Group used an afternoon and a night's time to make sufficient preparations for the Ling King's tomb mission. Nangong Firen had to admit that the Death God mercenary group was indeed inferior to the World Mercenary Group in this aspect. Even if their Azura group's motive for coming to the Ling King's tomb was to surround the World Group, hence they had purposely accepted a mission regarding the tomb. However, no matter what the purpose was, they should also make sufficient preparations before leaving. If it wasn't for them underestimating the World Group and overestimating their own abilities, they wouldn't have been humiliated to such an extent by the World Group and wouldn't have been left speechless by the World Group. It wasn't that their Death God mercenary group had lost their past glory and lost the ability to be a gold metal mercenary. It was just that the opponents they encountered were even more powerful. Of course, Nangong Firen did not admit that he was powerful in terms of martial strength. Instead, as a mercenary group, the World Mercenary Group was superior no matter if it was the way of doing things or handling matters. In the future, the World Mercenary Group would definitely be an extremely strong opponent. Nangong Firen passed the jade bottles one by one in silence. When Yi Fengru received the air-freshening pill, his expression was somewhat unsightly. He gripped the jade bottle tightly for a moment before pouring out a pill and throwing it into his mouth. After swallowing the air-freshening pill, everyone finally felt the feeling of being reborn. Nangong Firen looked at the World Group, which was already a distance away before looking at the opening stone wall. Taking a deep breath, Zhang Xian waved his arm and gritted his teeth. After entering the stone wall, there was another long, quiet, and deep tunnel. The only difference was that the air here was much colder than outside the stone wall. This kind of coldness was the kind that emanated from the bones. The thin mist floating in the air was faintly suffused with a green color. The Yin Qi was heavy and horrifying. The elite members of the Killing God group furrowed their brows. Withstanding the huge psychological pressure, they braced themselves and followed the leader's footsteps forward. These mercenaries had never imagined that they would be at the bottom of the Qianling King's tomb. They all thought that, at most, they would be able to complete the outer perimeter quests of the Tomb King's tomb, and then complete the quests Yi Fengru gave them. It wasn't a simple mission, but if they could complete an ordinary mission from the tomb, it would be enough for them to show off in the mercenary world. They could also ride on the wave of popularity. But now, All the plans had deviated from the original design. The deeper they went into the tomb, the more dangerous it was for them. Who was not afraid of death? Especially for elite gold medal mercenaries like them. They hadn't enjoyed enough glory, so how could they be willing to die? With apprehensions and unwillingness in their hearts, the more they walked, the more fearful they became, unlike the World Group's young mercenaries who had no distracting thoughts in their hearts. With such a comparison, it was no wonder that Yi Qing Luo would question the authenticity of their gold-ranked mercenary group. Chapter 818. Ordinary corpses would definitely not be able to nurture such a huge number of corpse worms. With so many corpse worms appearing, it indicates that we are not far from the Guardian Corpse King. The World Group's mission was to bring the Guardian Corpse King back. To the World Group, to be able to reach the Guardian Corpse King's array, it should be a joyous matter. But Yi Qing Luo only felt strange. According to the 3,000 Peach Blossom Group's information on Ling King's tomb, the tomb is set up with arrays and mechanisms, and if one is slightly careless, one's head would be separated from his body. But we're about to reach the Guardian Corpse King's array, but we haven't met with any danger along the way. Not to mention mechanisms. There wasn't even a single bit of array at all. The only danger was this wave of corpse worms. How could it be so smooth? Thinking back to when they were at the outer boundary, the sudden collapse of the tomb, Yi Qing Luo was even more certain that her earlier guess was probably true. There was another group of people at the bottom of the tomb. These arrays and mechanisms were settled by that group of people to be able to reach the bottom of the tomb without any casualties. The other party, who on earth were they? They actually had such ability? Yi Qing Luo's expression turned increasingly grave. Yi Qing Luo's words were clearly heard by every single mercenary in the World Group. They also realized that there wasn't any danger along the way, and it was merely the tranquility before the storm. This mission in Ling King's tomb was much more dangerous than what they had imagined. The World Group's emotions had also affected the Azura Group's side. Nangong Firen's attention was totally placed on Yi Qing Luo as his eyes didn't conceal his interest towards her at all. Seeing Yi Qing Luo's expression gradually turning grave and finally becoming more and more solemn, his heart also started to tremble fiercely. He knew in his heart that the journey ahead would probably be filled with danger. He retracted his gaze and took a look at Nangong Lin, who was following closely beside him as he pursed his lips and transmitted his voice solemnly through the mercenary group badge. "Feng Ru, you're still poisoned, so if you meet with any danger later, you don't need to care about anything else. Just help me take good care of Lin, or will do." Yi Feng Ru frowned as his vision swept past the timid Nangong Lin. "I will take care of Lin, but I'm poisoned doesn't mean that I'm useless. Up till now, no one has ever come out alive from the bottom of the Ling King's tomb, but we've walked till now, and just like what the World Group's Vice Group leader said, we're about to reach the array protecting the King Corpse. This meant that they were not far from the main tomb of the Ling King. This also meant that this was the lowest level of the tomb. Just as he finished his words, a dissatisfied expression surfaced on Zi Qianqian's beautiful face. "Leader, the World Group is merely a bronze plate mercenary group that's slightly prepared for King Ling's tomb. You really believe that woman's words?" "Qianqian." Nangong Firen frowned and glanced at Zi Qianqian with displeasure. He knew his deputy leader's character very well, so he didn't say much. "It's always good to be careful. I hope the Death God mercenary group can guarantee the glory of its own gold medal." Both groups were saying the same thing to their own teams. The environment in front of him had changed. The long and deep tunnel turned into 5 narrow paths. There was also a black coffin placed on each of the paths. Coffin? Everyone's expressions had a huge change. Nangong Firen's heart sunk. Indeed. We've really reached the array protecting the King Corpse. Chapter 819. These words were extremely domineering. Yi Qing Luo's expression was indifferent as her frosty eyes squinted slightly as she continued. In the ancient tomb, there are many things which feed on something from the human body. For example, blood, essence, flesh. Pausing, her lips curled upwards slightly. Under such circumstances, when they saw such a strange smile, everyone couldn't help but shuddered. Even though the one smiling was a peerless beauty that could topple cities, everyone still felt terrified. Nan Gonglin was so frightened that her face turned pale as tears streamed down as she buried her head in her brother's arms, not daring to cry out. Nan Gongfiren's brows creased tightly as he gazed deeply at Yi Qing Luo as a glint flashed past his eyes. Earlier, when Yi Qing Luo made a move on Nan Gonglin, it wasn't because she wanted to kill her, but she was certain that, as her brother, he wouldn't just stand by and watch. If he hadn't carried Nan Gonglin away in time, then these corpse worms would have completely swallowed Nan Gonglin. Many thanks. Nan Gongfiren wasn't that kind of idiot who couldn't differentiate right from wrong as he directly jumped out these two words towards Yi Qing Luo. There were probably less than 5 people in this world who could receive Nan Gongfiren's thanks personally. To the others, this was considered a huge honor. But Yi Qing Luo didn't reveal much emotions towards his gratitude, as she spoke calmly. There are a lot of corpse worms here, so I believe there should be some corpses which are used to feed them. There is a possibility that we have already reached the vicinity of the array which protects the king corpse. For those corpses which had died for hundreds of years and were only left with white bones, it wasn't possible to condense so many corpse worms. To be able to condense 100 over corpse worms was already considered as the maximum. Yi Qing Luo looked at those Azura God group's mercenaries whose faces were filled with astonishment. Come over! Those mercenaries stared intently at the place which Nan Gonglin was sitting on earlier, as the corpse worms surged densely, not daring to move at all. Yi Qing Luo's eyes turned slightly cold. Since you're not willing to come over, then continue to stay there. Saying that, she raised her hand. Nan Gongfiren hugged Nan Gonglin tightly as he borrowed the force from the rock walls to swiftly leap over to the world group's side. Immediately following that, Zi Qianqian, Yi Fengru, and Wei Beilai also jumped over to the world group's side. The other mercenaries naturally obeyed their leader's orders. When the last Azura God group's mercenary group stood still, he saw Yi Qing Luo's 5 fingers moving. Nan Gongfiren and the others then realized that what Yi Qing Luo was holding in her hands was a ball-shaped lamp oil. With a flick of her finger, the oil lamp immediately burst into flames. Yi Qing Luo casually threw it towards the direction where those worms were surging. With a bang, the lamp was fried, and the flame instantly spread over those worms. The flames surged, elongating everyone's shadows. However, when the fire burned, the crowd did not feel the slightest bit of warmth. Instead, they felt that it was getting colder and colder. Thick smoke billowed and filled the long tunnel. Everyone's eyes were a little dry from the smoke. Let's go. Yi Qing Luo looked at those worms which were engulfed by the flames, as her tightly knitted brows had yet to ease up. She turned around and left, and the others naturally followed suit. Long Yunjian walked beside Yi Qing Luo, and when he saw Yi Qing Luo's frowning expression, he bent down slightly as he inquired softly, "What's the matter?" Yi Qing Luo went silent for a moment as she transmitted her voice through the mercenary group badge. Somehow I feel that after we entered the tomb today, everything that happened is very strange. Somehow I feel something is not right. Chapter 821. 5 coffins as black as ink, without any other colors. The most attractive thing was the extremely complicated patterns carved on the top of the coffins. Looking closely, those patterns weren't totems, but a strange array. These 5 coffins are not the real corpse king. Yi Qing Luo stopped in her tracks, as her gaze swept past the 5 small paths. 5 corpse guard king, king guard tomb king. This was the 8 words mantra which was passed down from the tomb king's main tomb. In these 5 coffins, there were 5 corpse puppets. Initially, when the corpse puppets set up the array, the only instruction they received was to guard the Corpse King, to stop any intruders who went near the Corpse King. After the 5 corpse puppets, it was the real Corpse King. After Yi Ching Luo saw the 5 coffins, her slender brows creased tightly. Their mission was to carry the coffins of the Corpse King back. To carry the Corpse King away, it was necessary to subdue these 5 corpse puppets. Furthermore, the guard king corpse might not be obedient enough to let her carry it away. This was an especially thorny task. Even if they reached the Corpse King's array unscathed, this mission, they might not be able to complete it. Didn't you say, since we're already here, we should at least give it a try? Long Yunjian stood by her side as his voice was deep. Yi Ching Luo heaved a long sigh as her long eyelashes fluttered, as she gazed at the 5 coffins in front. Yes, we're already here. There's no reason to give up just because we're not feeling well. But when he said it, his tone was unusually heavy. Not knowing why, Yi Ching Luo had an inexplicable feeling of fluster. The profound jade heart that was surging in his chest was also unceasingly emitting a kind of warning intent. DMO Xian had only left for a day. By right, this profound jade heart, which was formed by DMO Xian, shouldn't have such a huge reaction. Lass, do you feel it? In her mind, Old Man Song's voice suddenly rang. Yi Ching Luo was slightly stunned as her heart sunk. Old Man Song, what's going on? There are several reasons why your profound jade heart is acting strangely. Currently, the closest reason is that your own strength has surpassed the level of the profound jade heart that DMO Xian forged for you. As a result, this profound jade heart is unable to withstand your own strength. To put it bluntly, it also meant that Yi Ching Luo's strength was increasing day by day. This profound heart jade that DMO Xian had formed for Yi Ching Luo was unable to withstand her strength, especially when Yi Ching Luo was in King Ling's tomb. The sense of danger caused the energy stored within Yi Ching Luo's body to expand continuously, causing her profound jade heart to be unable to take it. Yi Ching Luo pursed her pink lips as her fair little hand covered her own heart, feeling the incessant impact of the scorching heat. After a while, she said bitterly, "What else?" Also, Old Man Song's voice paused and he sighed. "In your heart, don't you already have an answer?" Yi Ching Luo's face turned slightly pale as she lowered her eyelids. Indeed, she already had an answer in her heart. He just didn't want to admit this answer. But hearing Old Man Song's tone, it also meant that her thoughts were not wrong. There was another possibility that something had happened to the mother profound jade heart which had formed this son profound jade heart. This thought flashed past her mind, but was directly rejected by Yi Ching Luo, who was DMO Xian, the Overlord who was invincible in this world. How could something possibly happen? Yi Ching Luo's slender fingers slightly curled up. While her thoughts were in a trance, there was a small conflict over at the Azura Group's side. Nan Gonglin was making a fuss about wanting to go home. Under the push, Yi Ching Luo's body was pushed forward a few steps. Chapter 8:22. Everyone's hair stood on end as their calves trembled and their entire bodies trembled. The raging wind swept up the shattered stones on the ground as it flew in all directions. Their ears were filled with an ear-piercing howl of the wind, mixed with the shattered stones rolling onto the ground as the explosion sounds were heard. A gust of chilly air speedily spread in the tunnel. Bam, 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 bam. A series of collisions were heard, and the 5 black coffin lids, which were placed quietly on the 5 small paths, all bounced open at the same time. 5 black coffin lids crossed each other in midair, and after drawing a few cold arcs, it directly leaned against the side of the coffins. Following that, 5 corpse puppets bounced out from the 5 open coffins. 5 corpse puppets stood stiffly at the front of coffins, as though they were wooden puppets which were hung in midair, without any signs of life. They were dressed in black loose robes and their entire heads were shrouded in the black robes, so their faces couldn't be seen. Corpse puppets. Corpse puppets. 5 high-leveled corpse puppets. Ghost. Ghost. We're dead meat. 5 high-leveled corpse puppets have been awakened. The death god mercenary groups, mercenaries, all shrunk backwards as no one was willing to stand at the forefront. And when they saw Yi Qing Luo standing on that small path, they couldn't help but burst out curses. The world group! Are you trying to get us killed? You obviously know the terror of the 5 corpses and still want to alarm them. These mercenaries, because Yi Qing Luo had struck their pride several times, putting on a high and mighty look, they had long been dissatisfied with Yi Qing Luo. Now that they saw Yi Qing Luo alarmed the 5 high-leveled corpse puppets, their belly full of terror, and terror exploded at this instance. The world group's vice group leader, what's the matter with you? Once the 5 corpses are alarmed, they will kill all the intruders before they stop. Do you want us to die with you? One person opened his mouth, and one after another people started to open their mouths. But when Yi Qing Luo turned her eyes sideways and stared coldly at them, everyone's voices seemed to be stuck in their throats, not able to say a single word. Her ravishing looks seemed to be covered with a layer of frost. Her long, narrow, and bewitching eyes shot out a piercingly cold light. It was as if being swept by her gaze would make one feel as if they were in an ice house, especially with the 5 corpse puppets in the background. This killing gaze swept over and successfully silenced the clamoring mercenaries. Yi Qing Luo stood on that small path, not moving at all. After making those people shut up, she turned around and stared indifferently at the 5 corpse puppets standing upright in the coffins. Her tone was calm, and no one could tell what she was feeling. The deal between the Killing God group and me is to assist the World group to complete the Mercenary Association's mission. After the members of the Azura group heard this, they were so nervous that they had difficulty breathing. His throat felt like it was being choked by something, and it was extremely uncomfortable. Complete the Mercenary Union's mission? Bring back the coffin of the Guardian Zombie King? How could this be possible? Don't joke around. Nangong Lin shivered in Nangong Firen's arms. Corpse puppets. Those are corpse puppets. Don't tell me you want to defeat these corpse puppets? Towards the terror of the corpse puppets, she more or less understood from the mutterings of the Azura group's mercenaries. It was undoubtedly like striking a rock with an egg. No matter if we want to or not, we have no way out now. Yi Qing Luo's expression was calm as she calmly opened her mouth. The corpse puppets were alarmed, which indicated that the corpse puppet array had been activated. If there was still a trace of living aura in the tomb, these corpse puppets would not return to their coffins to sleep again. Chapter 8:23. I want to go home. Brother, I want to go home. She's a lunatic. Nangong Lin's chest was in pain as she bit her lower lip tightly. She was so scared that her tears kept flowing out. Nangong Firen frowned as she exchanged glances with the other vice group leaders. She could see the helplessness in each other's eyes, just as what Yi Qing Luo said. No matter whether they wanted to defeat these 5 corpse puppets, they had no other way out. Once the corpse puppets were alarmed, none of them would be able to escape. Only by giving it their all would they have a chance to survive. If it wasn't for her overestimating herself, we wouldn't have ended up in such a state. Zi Qianqian's beautiful face surfaced a trace of sullen anger. She really thinks that she's so powerful, putting on a look of a senior to lecture us. In the end, it's because they don't have the ability to make sufficient preparations before taking on the mission. Those who have the ability, no matter where they go, will not be a problem. Qianqian, Nangong Firen, shook her head at Zi Qianqian. Am I wrong? Zi Qianqian gave a cold harumph. If she really has the ability, she wouldn't have used her second brother's life to threaten us. Nangong Firen's brows were tightly knitted into a bundle. Zi Qianqian's words weren't without reason. But Nangong Firen still felt that the World Group's cautious attitude was indeed what their Azura group lacked. Looking at Zi Qianqian's fairy-like face, which was obviously filled with disgust and arrogance, Nangong Firen could still see the jealousy towards Yi Qing Luo in the depths of her eyes. Jealous, yes. How could she not be jealous? All along, Zi Qianqian was hailed as the genius among the geniuses. She had an enviable, profound jade heart, and her cultivation speed was extraordinary, no matter if it was beauty, ability, or intellect. Zi Qianqian was forever high up and was hailed as Fairy Qianqian. Yi Qing Luo's appearance was enough to make Zi Qianqian feel a sense of crisis. But now Nangong Firen had no intention to delve into this issue with Zi Qianqian at this juncture. She only replied calmly, "Let's talk about this after we leave the tomb." Yi Qing Luo stood stiffly on the spot as she squinted her eyes at the 5 corpse puppets. Her mind was searching for ways to deal with the corpse puppets. She could not move. The 5 corpse formation had already been activated. Now, as long as she took a slight step forward, the 5 corpse puppets would definitely jump up at the same time. Once they left the coffins, this fierce battle would begin. "Little girl," an old voice sounded extremely clear and spacious in this silent tunnel. Among the World Group, an old man dressed in a white brocade robe and dressed like a nouveau riche slowly climbed down from the back of a mercenary from the World Group. As if he had just woken up, he stroked his messy white hair and yawned. "Not bad, little girl. You've reached the bottom of the tomb so quickly. Not bad, not bad. You're much faster than I expected." The appearance of the old man caused the gazes of the 100 or so mercenaries to focus on him. "The World Group, are you guys crazy? Why did you bring your grandfather to this kind of place?" When Nangong Lin saw Holy Pirate, her face changed. She pointed at Holy Pirate angrily. "Do you think Ling King's tomb is a scenic spot? Do you think you can go sightseeing?" This was originally an extremely dangerous situation. An additional person who didn't even have the strength to truss a chicken meant that they had an additional burden. There was a possibility that it would lead to their total annihilation. The World Group's youngsters frowned tightly as they stared at Nangong Lin unhappily. Right now, she was the biggest burden, okay? And she didn't even know it. Chapter 8:24. Yi Qing Luo's slender brows creased slightly as her charming eyes were like frost as she cried out sharply, "Shut up! Now is not the time to quarrel. Gather your spirits and get into formation to defend." The World Group's mercenaries retracted the thoughts in their eyes as they speedily got into formation, listening to Yi Qing Luo's instructions. Nangong Firen grabbed Nangong Lin's arm as he pushed her into Yi Fengru's arms and immediately gave a stern command. "God-slaying mercenary group, fully cooperate with the World Mercenary Group." That command was given, and although those mercenaries were dissatisfied, but they didn't show it out. As a mercenary, the most important condition was to obey all instructions. The 2 groups of people were already in position to prepare for battle. Yi Qing Luo half narrowed her eyes as she glanced sideways at God Thief, who was standing by the side with a satisfied expression. "Come over here." God Thief was still stretching his waist when he heard Yi Qing Luo's words, and in a blink of an eye, he had already appeared in front of her, towards this kind of gloomy place. God Thief was already used to it, not to mention that he had been imprisoned in the underground prison for 10 years, living in darkness, gloomy days. Even if he hadn't gone to Death God Castle before he was imprisoned, he had been to places like tombs quite a number of times. The current God Thief walked towards Yi Qing Luo with a calm expression. Standing by the side of the 5 small paths, God Thief dug his ears. "Young lady, you need my help so soon." "What weaknesses does the corpse puppet have?" Yi Qing Luo rolled her eyes at him. She wasn't in the mood to joke around with him. God Thief scratched the back of his head as his face was still sloppy with an indifferent expression. But when he opened his mouth, he was extremely serious. These 5 corpse puppets were created by the combined efforts of the 4 sect masters 1,000 years ago. During the process of creation, they absorbed the heaven and earth's yin qi and the graveyard's grievance to form them, so they belonged to the high-grade corpse puppets. Yi Qing Luo was very clear about this point as she nodded her head and didn't say a word. After 1,000 years, these corpse puppets are only left with a set of skeletons. If they want to regain their human form, they will need to absorb living creatures, and after they merge with the living creatures, they will be able to take on the appearance of the merged living creatures. Because of this, the minute these corpse puppets moved, they would try their best to snatch the living creatures to merge with them. The corpse puppets have weaknesses, but the high-grade corpse puppets refined by the 4 great sect masters have no weaknesses. Holy Pirate stroked his white beard and gently sighed. He shook his head and said, "Normal corpse puppets, if they do not absorb yin energy or spirits, cannot use the body of a corpse puppet to continue living. To deal with normal corpse puppets, we just need to stop them from absorbing yin energy or spirits. But these 5 high-level corpse puppets have already guarded the tomb of the Ling King for 1,000 years. In addition to the endless stream of profound practitioners, grave robbers, and the other profound practitioners who have been sending over the past 1,000 years, they have long since nourished them to the point where, even after another 1,000 years, they will still be able to continue living." Holy Pirate's voice was not loud, but it traveled clearly into everyone's ears in the silent grave. Nangong Firen's expression darkened. Zi Qianqian and Wei Beilai had already transmitted their voices through the mercenary group's badges, thinking about retreating quickly. However, this thought had just left his mouth. Yi Fengru, who had been holding Nangong Lin's waist, suddenly turned pale. His body twitched and he collapsed. His back was against the rock wall behind him, as his 5 fingers clasped in the direction of his heart. That intense pain which started to expand after his heart was pricked by needles attacked him once again. 2 hours had passed. The poison in Yi Fengru's body acted up again in an instant. Ru! Zi Qianqian's beautiful brows creased tightly as she half squatted down to support Yi Fengru. A sliver of hatred flashed past her eyes. They had no choice but to retreat. Chapter 8:25. Yi Qing Luo shot a cold glance, and her fingertips moved as she fished out a medicinal pill. "I can't move now. Come over to take the medicine." The current Yi Qing Luo was equivalent to a mechanism. The minute it was activated, those 5 advanced leveled corpse puppets would pounce towards them without any hesitation. Zi Qianqian was about to head over, but Yi Fengru held her hand tightly as his expression was filled with pain as he couldn't help but moan in pain. "I'll go." Nangong Lin looked at Yi Fengru with heartache as she anxiously rushed over. Dashing in front of Yi Qing Luo, Nangong Lin grabbed her wrist as she barbarically pulled the medicinal pill out from her hand. Following that, she pushed Yi Qing Luo harshly as she turned around and ran towards Yi Fengru. "Your mother, Nangong Lin, are you King sick?" Yi Qing Luo's expression changed drastically as an unconcealable rage surged in her chest. "Damn it! Don't be afraid of a godlike opponent, only afraid of a pig-like teammate." This Nangong Lin was simply the representative of God among the pig-like teammates. Yi Qing Luo had just finished howling when the entire tomb suddenly gave off a loud sound as the ground started to shake continuously. Immediately following that, those 5 upright corpse puppets gave off a mournful howl. The sound traveled extremely far as wave after wave, irritating one's eardrums. Large pieces of rubble from the rock wall continued to fall. Some of them crashed onto the mercenaries' heads, causing a wound as their heads were filled with blood. Due to the fact that they had seen the corpse worms earlier, these mercenaries immediately took out the medicinal powder to stop the bleeding as they carelessly applied it onto their wounds. A thin layer of green mist, visible to the naked eye, gradually spread out in the tomb. The two groups of mercenary groups stared blankly at the front, at those 5 corpse puppets which had their hands stretched out facing the top of the tomb. That thin green weapon was being sucked into their bodies at an extremely fast speed. The world group quickly retreat. Yi Qing Luo shouted out sharply as she grabbed onto the lazy god thief as she speedily moved backwards. The world group's mercenaries subconsciously obeyed her command as they followed Yi Qing Luo to retreat. At the same time, those 5 corpse puppets leapt upwards as they speedily attacked towards their direction. Ah, help! There were a few screams. Before the death god mercenary group could react, the few elite mercenaries standing at the front had already been captured by the corpse puppets. The luminous pearl shone brightly. Everyone could clearly see that the mercenary's hand was a piece of white bone. No one would be able to remain calm when they saw a person being pinned down by a few bones. In particular, after White Bones tightened its grip on the mercenaries, it didn't even take 10 breaths for the green mist to envelop the captive mercenaries. All that was left of the captive mercenaries were one by one. It was directly absorbed by these corpse puppets. In just a few breaths, the Death God mercenary group had lost 8 mercenaries who had fallen from the outside and were injured. Go! Nangong Firen's expression changed drastically as he silently scolded Yi Qing Luo for not informing them first, as he immediately asked his group members to leave with Yi Qing Luo. However, he did not dare to show his anger on the surface. After all, it was Nangong Lin who caused the 5 high-level corpse puppets to react. Nangong Firen regretted bringing her willful younger sister with her today, noticing her own brother's gaze, as well as the Death God mercenary group's reproachful gazes towards her. Nangong Lin pouted her lips aggrievedly as she sobbed. I didn't do it on purpose. She only hated Yi Qing Luo and casually gave her a push. Who knew that it would cause such an outcome? Chapter 8:26. Big Brother. No. Nangong Lin's expression changed drastically. Her face was filled with grievance and shock. If her father found out about her performance in the tomb, her days in the future would definitely not be so peaceful. However, looking at Nangong Firen's determined expression, Nangong Lin could only swallow her words. In his heart, he hated Yi Qing Luo even more. If it wasn't for Yi Qing Luo, the Death God mercenary group wouldn't have reached the bottom of the tomb. The mercenaries that her brother had spent so much effort to train wouldn't die either. She would not be blamed by her brother. He would not let his father know about this. It was obvious that Nangong Lin had forgotten about it. Everything that had happened in King Ling's tomb was because Yi Fengru wanted to snatch the profound phoenix ring. Hence, he had provoked Yi Qing Luo first. Yi Qing Luo and the others fled extremely swiftly, and not too long later, they had already reached the place where they had set fire to those worms. Behind him, the miserable cries of the god-slaying mercenary group could be heard. Yi Qing Luo didn't turn back, and neither did anyone in the world group. The fire in front of him didn't go out just because the insect carcass was burned to death. Instead, it continued to burn, and the flames rose higher and higher, as if it was going to burn the entire tomb. Nangong Firen saw the flickering flames from afar. Zi Qianqian's beautiful face was covered with anger. What a good fire! There was a raging inferno in front and a corpse puppet behind. We will all die here today. This fire was started by Yi Qing Luo. Zi Qianqian naturally vented his anger on Yi Qing Luo. Yi Qing Luo couldn't be bothered, but Kitty Li, who had been following beside Yi Qing Luo, couldn't take it. Kitty Li turned her head and made a funny face at Zi Qianqian. If it wasn't for this fire, you would have been swallowed by the corpse worms just now. Would you even have the chance to talk here? You. Zi Qianqian gritted his teeth as a trace of anger flashed through his eyes. Kitty Li snorted and shook her head, ignoring Zi Qianqian. The corpse puppet behind him was extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, it had already caught up. Wherever it passed, the rock walls and gravel cracked. If their legs were any slower, they would be completely absorbed by the corpse puppets. The feather fan in Yi Qing Luo's hand shook and shot out a strand of silver thread, directly piercing into the crevice of the rock wall. She tugged, and after confirming her strength, she leaped. The thin silver threads reflected a cold glint. Following Yi Qing Luo's strength, the silver wire continued to sway, and the place where the silver wire was fixed gave out a creaking sound of crushed stones. Yi Qing Luo borrowed the strength from the surrounding rock walls and the silver wires to swiftly pass through the burning flames. Soon after, a few silver threads pierced into the rock wall one by one. The youngsters in the mercenary group didn't say a word as they followed behind Yi Qing Luo speedily past the flames. The world group. You guys. Wei Beilai immediately panicked. He quickly walked forward, wanting to snatch a silver wire, but before he could step forward, he was pushed aside by the world group's youngsters. In a blink of an eye, 90 over mercenaries from the world group had already arrived at the other end of the flames. The 5 corpse puppets had already caught up. Sharp and ear-piercing corpse howls resounded. Nangong Firen threw Nangong Lin to Yi Fengru and pushed them toward the silver threads. Then he drew his long sword and leaped into the midst of the corpse puppets to attract their attention. "Brother!" Nangong Lin's face turned pale as she cried out in fear. Before she could struggle to chase after Nangong Firen, her body suddenly felt light as Yi Fengru brought her along and climbed onto one of the silver threads. Zi Qianshan and the others tugged on the silver threads. Seeing that it was as thin as hair, they had some doubts in their hearts, but they used a little more strength to ascertain that it was able to withstand their weight. One by one, they swiftly passed through the fire. There were a few mercenaries who were too anxious and almost fell into the fire. When the last surviving mercenary landed steadily in the middle of the bonfire, Roland's eyes lit up. Chapter 8:27. Nangong Firen's profound rank was above the earth profound rank. In the Nirvana realm, he could be considered a high-level profound practitioner at his age. However, he was completely powerless against the 5 corpse puppets with just this bit of ability. The only reason he could hold on for such a long time was because of the long sword in his hand. The long sword should be a weapon above the supreme level and had been stained with the aura of talismans. When the sword swept past the corpse puppets, they would subconsciously avoid the longsword's attack. When the longsword slashed the black robe of one of the corpse puppets, the black robe immediately emitted a puff of green smoke, revealing half of the white bone under the black robe. However, even with the protection of the longsword, it was hard for him to avoid being injured by the 5 corpse puppets by himself when fighting them alone. After the last mercenary crossed the bonfire, he had just heaved a sigh of relief when his arm was cut by the white bone of one of the corpse puppets. Nangong Firen moved quickly, enduring the sharp pain of his arm being corroded. He raised his sword and swung it. The corpse puppet quickly retracted its white bone. The fragrance of human blood wafted from the corroded arm. The other 4 corpse puppets howled crazily, and a bloodthirsty red light flashed under their black robes. They swarmed toward Nangong Firen in unison. Nangong Firen's heart sank. He glanced sideways at his bleeding arm and vaguely saw his white bone. A chilly yin qi spread from the wound on his arm to his body. As the corpse puppets approached, Nangong Firen wanted to raise his sword to repel them. However, the chilly yin qi made him feel cold all over, and his fingers holding the long sword stiffened. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't move his arm. The increasingly intense yin qi was assaulting his face. Nangong Firen closed his eyes in despair. "Forget it. It's worth it if I can let my brother survive by sacrificing myself." At this moment, he suddenly felt a grip on his arm. Nangong Firen felt as if something had wrapped around his body. His body suddenly became light, and he was pulled by a force. "Big brother!" Nangong Lin's sobbing voice rang in his ears. Immediately after, a pair of ice-cold hands directly grabbed his arm. The woman's cold voice rang out, "Don't touch him. Get out of the way." Nangong Firen opened her eyes and saw a pair of emotionless eyes. Those eyes were pitch black and bright, like the resplendent stars in the sky. The corners of his eyes were long and narrow, revealing an extremely enchanting and evil charm. As it spun, it gave off a dazzling flowing light. The streak of light shot into Nangong Firen's heart. For some unknown reason, his heart was beating rapidly, uncontrollably. Even his breathing became stagnant. "Don't you dare touch my brother! You wicked woman! You could have used these silver threads to pull my brother over, but you had to wait until he was injured and on the verge of death before bringing him over. You're trying to kill my brother." Nangong Lin cried and hugged Nangong Firen's waist tightly. Her tearful eyes stared at the corroded wound on his arm with fear, and her tears fell even harder. Yi Qing Luo didn't have such a good temper. At this juncture, she still allowed her to throw a little tantrum. Yi Qing Luo directly clasped Nangong Lin's shoulder and easily pulled her up, throwing her towards Yi Fengru's direction. "If I had pulled your brother over earlier, your brother's intention of using his own life to fight for time for you to escape would have been wasted." Yi Qing Luo's tone was icy cold, as her ridiculing gaze swept past the Azura God group's mercenaries who were standing by the side with lingering fear, as her lips curled into a cold arc. Chapter 828. When the Death God group's mercenaries heard that, their faces flushed red as they lowered their eyelids in guilt. Earlier, when their lives were on the line, all they were thinking about was how to survive. They had sufficient time to use the silver thread to cross that pile of raging fire because their group leader had sacrificed his own life to fight for time for them. Luckily, Yi Qing Luo made a move at the last moment. Yi Qing Luo didn't have the leisure to watch the Death God mercenary group put on a show of brotherly love. She directly took out a medicine bottle and threw it into Zi Qianshan's hands as she commanded in a deep voice. The smell of blood not only stimulates the corpse puppets, it will also attract the corpse worms. Help him stop the bleeding and expel the corpse qi that has entered his body after avoiding the corpse puppets. Zi Qianshan caught the medicine bottle as her slender brows creased tightly, not liking Yi Qing Luo's commanding tone. Just as she was about to retort, she saw Yi Qing Luo turning her head over, and the red feather fan in her hands seemed to have merged into one with the raging fire, dancing in joy on her slender, jade-like fingertips. Those few silver threads which were inserted into the rock wall speedily retracted back into the feather fan. Zi Qianshan's words could only be kept in her throat. Clenching her teeth, she squatted down and started to bandage Nangong Firen's wound to stop the bleeding. Those 5 corpse puppets saw all their targets and had already crossed the ball of raging fire as they howled and charged over. Yi Qing Luo used the silver threads to swiftly weave a 5 elemental enchantment on both sides of the rock wall. Following that, she took out a round oil lamp and threw it into that pile of fire as she shouted at the same time, "Run!" Although Yi Qing Luo was only a copperplate mercenary group's vice group leader, but at this moment she had already become everyone's backbone. Yi Qing Luo gave her command, and everyone speedily turned around and ran without any hesitation. 5 corpse puppets flew forward, and 5 skeletons crashed against the silver threads which had formed the enchantment, blocking them. The corpse puppets held a few times as their ghastly white bones directly grabbed onto the silver threads. Coincidentally, the round oil lamp which Yi Qing Luo threw entered the pile of fire. With a rub, the fire surged and directly burned to the highest point of the rock wall. The endless flames swallowed the 5 corpse puppets. After Yi Qing Luo threw the oil lamp, she immediately turned around and displayed her smooth footwork, speedily chasing up to the others. Seeing Yi Qing Luo following up, Long Yunjian and the others who were running at the back were relieved. "Is he dead?" Qiao Jin turned his head over and asked Yi Qing Luo. The other mercenaries strained their ears to listen as they ran. Yi Qing Luo shook her head lightly. High-leveled corpse puppets aren't afraid of ordinary flames burning. God Thief said this before. This kind of high-leveled corpse puppets have no weaknesses at all. Then what should we do? A trace of fear appeared on Wei Bei's handsome face, and his voice trembled uncontrollably. Are we really going to die here today? As an executive group leader, every word you say is related to the mercenaries' psychological state changes. Yi Qing Luo didn't answer his question directly, but sneered and blamed him expressionlessly. Yi Qing Luo didn't answer his question directly, but sneered and blamed him expressionlessly. Wei Bailey's face darkened, and he immediately shut his mouth. This woman was indeed smart and capable, but his mouth and his arrogant attitude was really annoying. Yi Qing Luo didn't care about unimportant people's thoughts. She retracted her thoughts as her gaze searched around for a way to avoid the corpse puppets. If they were chased by the corpse puppets, they would appear extremely passive. There was no preparation or chance for them to counterattack. Yi Qing Luo took a deep breath as her mind kept replaying the places which they had passed by along the way. Even the details of the gravel, vines, and moss were clearly reflected in his mind. Chapter 829. The place which Yi Qing Luo had chosen was exactly that stone wall which had Duke Ling's totem. The head of King Ling on the stone wall was the mechanism of the stone wall. As long as he grasped this, he would have enough time to expel the corpse qi from Nangong Firen's body. The group sprinted all the way, and before long they arrived at the stone wall. Yi Qing Luo asked the mercenaries to return to the middle layer of King Ling's tomb, and when she turned her head to take a look, she didn't see any corpse puppets chasing after them. She let out a sigh of relief. High-level corpse puppets were not afraid of fire. However, the corpse puppets were still affected. At the very least, the 5 corpse puppets would not be able to break free from the burning flames for a while. Yi Qing Luo was the last to cross over the stone wall. As she speedily pressed on the stone wall, another deafening rumbling sound rang out, and the stone door that had been opened slowly closed. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief and leaned against the wall, gasping for breath. At this moment, he couldn't care less about the slippery vines and the moss that made his hair stand on end. Zi Qianqian helped Nangong Firen to sit against the rock wall. Yi Qing Luo didn't waste any time as she walked straight to Nangong Firen's side and squatted down as she pulled up his arm which had been corroded by the corpse puppet. It felt extremely cold to the touch. The slightest touch was like touching ice. It was bone-chilling. Yi Qing Luo's expression turned grave as she carefully sized up Nangong Firen's face. Nangong Firen closed her eyes tightly. A thin layer of cold air seeped out of her forehead, and her eyelashes were covered with a layer of white frost. The corners of his eyes were already covered with a patch of greenish-black. The situation was more serious than he had imagined. Lass, you have to expel the corpse qi for him as soon as possible. Old Man Song's urging voice rang in his ears. If the corpse aura pervades his heart and corrodes his profound heart jade, then he'll be hopeless. Yi Qing Luo took a deep breath. As for the method to expel corpse qi, she had never dabbled in it. It was just that when he was reading the information about the Ling King's tomb last night, he had also thought about the problem of corpse qi. At that time, he only asked Old Man Song about a simple method to prevent the corpse qi from entering his body, but he didn't delve too deeply into it. At this moment, she could only listen to Old Man Song's instructions. Yi Qing Luo flipped her palm, and the red feather fan slid into her palm. She gripped the fan handle tightly, and with a flick of her finger, a sharp dagger slid out. She lifted Nangong Firen's arm and was about to cut his wound with the dagger. However, Zi Qianqian grabbed his arm. "What are you doing? Let go." Yi Qing Luo knitted her brows and looked at her coldly with a displeased expression. I really doubt the real strength of the gold metal mercenary group." Her tone was full of disdain and mockery. "Ever since we entered the tomb of the Ling King, your death god mercenary group has caused trouble time and time again. You've dragged down our operation and become a burden on me." What did you say?" Zi Qianqian was so angry that her beautiful face turned red. Her pair of cold eyes were filled with anger. Yi Qingluo gave a light humph. "What I'm saying, you know it clearly in your hearts. If I had known that you were a bunch of trash, I would never have signed that deal with you." These words were completely undisguised disdain for the god-slaying mercenary group. The World Mercenary Group's mercenaries were secretly delighted. They all gave their vice group leaders words 32 big thumbs up in their hearts. From the start to the end, the god-slaying mercenary group had always placed themselves in a high and mighty position, as though accompanying them into the bottom level of the Ling King's tomb was a condescending act. But in actual fact, the god-slaying mercenary group's performance was totally an existence of a burden. Not only did they not have any practical use, they even kept on creating trouble, which caused people to die one after another. Chapter 830. The underlying meaning was that if Zi Qianqian still wanted to stir up any trouble, she wouldn't bother about the death god mercenary group's life or death. Zi Qianqian's back instantly felt a chill, and when he met Yi Qingluo's long and narrow eyes, he felt as though something was strangling his neck, making it hard for him to breathe. Perhaps it was Yi Qingluo's words which made Zi Qianqian sense the seriousness of the situation. Or perhaps it was Yi Qingluo's imposing manner which suppressed Zi Qianqian so much that he had no way to resist. Zi Qianqian's hand stiffly released Yi Qingluo's wrist as he took half a step back. The expression on his beautiful face was congealed and stiff. Yi Qingluo retracted her gaze as the blade speedily cut the wound on Nangong Firen's arm, which had already stopped bleeding. The medicinal powder which stopped the bleeding was swiftly dissolved and cleaned up. The wound was so deep that the bone could be seen. Yi Qingluo's expression didn't change as she directly cut the wound even bigger. Blood started to gush out immediately. The death god mercenary group's mercenaries' hearts were filled with terror. Wandering on the blade's edge for several decades, they had experienced all sorts of dangerous missions. But they had never done such a strange mission. They could kill any demon, magical beast, or mirage beast without any expression. But unfortunately, this time round they were facing a ghost. For these mercenaries to reach their current position, whose hands weren't stained with blood, naturally he was extremely afraid of this kind of thing, especially the fear which the corpse puppets and worms brought to them had already seeped deep into their bones. Looking at Yi Qingluo's agile actions, no one went up to stop her. At this moment, Long Yunzhan's icy cold eyes swept past everyone without any warmth as he spoke calmly. "Do a head count." Qiao Jin and the others responded and started to count the number of people. After around half an incense's time, the few of them counted the number of people. The World Mercenary Group has a total of 96 people who entered King Ling's tomb. Currently, there are 96 people left, and 3 of them have some external injuries. Death God Mercenary Group has a total of 37 people who entered King Ling's tomb. Currently, there are 13 people left and 5 injured. When the head count was done, the Death God Mercenary Group's mercenaries' faces flushed red. Even Zi Qianqian, who had his eyes on top of his head, had unnaturally shifted his vision away, embarrassed to look at the World Mercenary Group. From the data, it could be seen who was the real lousy teammate. Long Yunzhan did not use these numbers to speak. He continued coldly, "Take advantage of this opportunity to properly nurse your body and strength. Right now, I can't be sure how long this stone wall can stop those corpse puppets. If a battle really breaks out later, you can only rely on yourself." It was rare for Long Yunzhan to speak for such a long time, so the World Group's mercenaries immediately responded in unison. On the Azura group's side, they looked at each other. Finally, under Yi Fengru's signal, they all sat cross-legged on the ground, closed their eyes, and stabilized the chaotic internal force in their bodies. The World group, on the other hand, took out the prepared rations and water bags from their space pockets, passing them down one by one as they ate the rations in big mouthfuls. The Killing God group and a dozen other mercenaries smelled the fragrance and immediately opened their eyes. Even in this kind of atmosphere, the ordinary dry rations that they usually disdained to eat seemed especially fragrant at this moment. 10 over-mercenary stomachs couldn't help but let out a growl in response. They had been guarding the World group outside the tomb since early in the morning and later on in King Ling's tomb, walking for over 2 hours and having experienced so many hair-raising matters. All their energy had been depleted. Chapter 831. Yi Fengru, who had received the space bag, had a glint in his gloomy eyes. His fingers tightened slightly as he stiffly passed it to the mercenaries beside him. The Death God group's mercenaries were all stuffing their stomachs without saying a word as their gazes were fixed on Yi Qingluo, who was still helping Nangong Firen to expel the corpse chi. She was obviously a 15-year-old young lady, looking so immature, and her profound chi was so weak, but she was able to take up such a heavy burden. Everything in the tomb was all because of this young lady. They were lucky enough to survive. They had no choice but to admit that after experiencing these 2 hours of matters, they were only left with a bellyful of admiration towards this 15-year-old young lady. Yi Qingluo followed Old Man Song's instructions as she swiftly operated the actions in her hands. It was all thanks to the numerous precious medicinal herbs which Dmo Xian had prepared in the profound phoenix ring. Combined with the medicinal herbs and profound qi, under the dual pressure, that lump of blood which was emitting green fog was finally expelled after 1 hour. Yi Qingluo used the oiled paper to wrap that pool of blood and wiped it clean without leaving a single trace. Following that, she stood up straight as she casually threw the oiled paper to Zi Qianqian. "If you don't want to attract the worms, then take good care of this bag of tainted blood." Saying that, she turned around and walked towards Long Yunjan's direction. She received the dry rations and water bag from Long Yunjan and started to gobble it down in big mouthfuls. "What should we do now?" Long Yunjan appeared slightly worried as his brows creased slightly as he glanced at the direction of the Death God group. More than 20 mercenaries from the Killing God group had died. If it wasn't for the fact that they had great teamwork and were able to listen to Yi Qingluo's instructions at the fastest speed, probably after the Death God group's mercenaries were all dead, the World group would not be spared. If they really followed the plan which they had before coming, which was Long Yunjan and the rest escorting their brothers out of the Ling King's tomb, while Yi Qingluo followed the Death God mercenaries to find a chance to complete the mission. Long Yunjan would not agree to it, no matter what. After all, not only did the Death God mercenaries have an ulterior motive towards Yi Qingluo, Long Yunjan also doubted the Death God mercenaries' ability. If Yi Qingluo and the Death God mercenaries were to stay, these people would probably become Yi Qingluo's burden. Yi Qingluo wiped the water from the corner of her mouth and placed the water bag back into her space pocket. She squinted her eyes and looked at the strange totem on the rock wall, which looked like it had been splashed with blood. Her slender brows frowned slightly. "I'm afraid it's impossible to return the way we came." Yi Qingluo clenched her fists and immediately shut her eyes. "We fell directly from the outer perimeter, and even if we were to return using the original route, we would at most reach the place where we fell. Isn't there another road over there? Let's go that way, and we'll be able to find the entrance to the periphery." Zi Qianqian anxiously spoke. After staying in such a gloomy place for so long, she could no longer endure it. Yi Qingluo didn't open her eyes as her lips curled into a ridiculing arc. "Then go ahead and try." In this tomb of the Ling King, there were not only 2 mercenary groups. There was also a group of powerful existences hidden in the dark. The The commotion caused by that wave of power was enough to cause the periphery of the tomb to collapse. It could be seen that the people from that wave of power should have directly entered from the middle level and reached the bottom level. Only thing was not sure what method that wave of power used to be able to bypass the 5 corpses and the Guardian King corpses to directly enter the main tomb of the Ling King, causing a commotion. Along the way, they didn't meet with any mechanisms or arrays. If Yi Qing Luo didn't guess wrongly, it should have been cleared by that wave of power. So if they were to return using the original route, that route would definitely be filled with mechanisms and arrays. Chapter 832. Especially until now, that hidden force had yet to reveal itself. Yi Qing Luo didn't believe that they had created such a huge commotion and that force had yet to discover it. Before she could guess the motive of that hidden force, Yi Qing Luo didn't intend to act rashly. If Zi Qianqian wanted to court death, she wouldn't stop him. But those with brains would know that if they chose to try their luck to find the middle-level exit alone, it was simply courting death. As expected, Zi Qianqian shut his mouth. Yi Qing Luo closed her eyes, as though she was taking a nap to recover her energy. In actual fact, she was asking Old Man Song in her mind if there was any way to restrain the corpse puppets. God Thief couldn't explain, but it didn't mean that Old Man Song, who had lived for thousands of years, didn't know. 1 hour, and there's no sound of the corpse puppets chasing after us. Apparently, these corpse puppets are afraid of fire. Yi Qing Luo pondered and said, but ordinary fire. I'm afraid there's no way to burn these 5 high-leveled corpse puppets. Sai, if I had let you pass the 2nd level of the Purgatory Tower earlier, you wouldn't be in such a predicament now. Old Man Tsang sighed helplessly. The 2nd level's reward can restrain the high-leveled corpse puppets? Yi Qing Luo frowned as her eyes shone brightly, but in a blink of an eye it dimmed down. Challenging the 1st level of the Purgatory Tower would take at least 1 day's time. Those 5 corpse puppets probably wouldn't give her the time to challenge them. And being in the Ling King's tomb, she wasn't at ease to directly extract her soul consciousness to challenge the Purgatory Tower. If any accident happened and her physical body was damaged, her soul consciousness and soul would be damaged. She couldn't take this risk. Whether you can restrain them or not, it's useless to say more now. Old Man Tsang realized that he had revealed the 2nd level of Purgatory's reward and immediately changed the topic. 5 high-leveled corpse puppet strength is equivalent to 5 sky mystic overlords. Just based on your strength, to defeat the 5 corpses is as difficult as ascending to heaven. Don't keep saying it's difficult. Give me some useful advice. Yi Qing Luo wanted to roll her eyes. At this moment, couldn't Old Man Tsang be straight to the point? Old Man Tsang remained silent for a moment before he slowly said, Actually, there's another way, but your profound jade heart might not be able to support it. Right now, the profound jade heart in Yi Qing Luo's heart had already shown some abnormalities. If he forcefully used the power of the profound jade heart in order to defeat the 5 corpses, your target isn't the 5 corpses, but the Guardian Corpse King. Once the 5 corpses die, the Guardian Corpse King will awaken. At that time, without the profound heart jade, you, who are extremely weak, might not even be able to resist a normal corpse puppet. Old Man Tsang's voice was exceptionally heavy. Yi Qing Luo's brows twitched a few times. Say it! The atmosphere was heavy. Another hour passed. Yi Qing Luo's eyes were still shut, without any reaction. If it wasn't for the occasional movement of her eyelashes, everyone would have suspected that she was asleep. There were already people on the Azura group's side who felt increasingly terrified and strange under this kind of tranquil atmosphere, and only wanted to quickly leave this place. But unfortunately, Yi Qing Luo had no intention to take action. At this moment, a loud and clear howl of a corpse broke the silence. Everyone's expression changed drastically. Their gazes were all focused on the stone wall. Before the crowd could recover from their shock, The tomb began to tremble violently once more. It was accompanied by sharp howls from the corpse hag. It was the turbulence caused by the corpse hag crashing against the stone wall. Everyone's faces were steely green, as one by one they shrunk towards Yi Qing Luo's direction. Yi Qing Luo slowly opened her eyes, as she squinted her eyes and gazed at the stone wall. Chapter 833. Indeed, her guess was right. That blazing fire obstructed the 5 corpse puppets for close to 2 hours. The corpse puppets were refined from dried corpses 1,000 years ago. Other than the black robe, there was only a set of skeleton left. Naturally, they were afraid of being burned by the fire. If it had been an ordinary corpse puppet, that wave of raging fire would have burned it to ashes. Looked like the method that old man Song mentioned earlier. She might pong, 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 pong. The sound of the corpse puppets hitting the stone wall became increasingly violent. Every time it shook, it seemed to affect one's heart as it kept twitching. Nan Gonglin was so scared that she broke out in cold sweat as her face was filled with tears. Run. Let's run. Who knows when those corpse puppets will break this stone wall open? Nangong Firen leaned against the stone wall as the back of his head touched those slippery vines, which made him feel extremely uncomfortable. Hearing Nan Gonglin's whimpering, he frowned slightly as he glanced sideways at his arm, which had been bandaged, and his target fell onto Yi Qing Luo. After the corpse qi was expelled from his body finally regained its temperature, and his body temperature gradually returned to normal. Moving his arm, there was no pain coming from the wound. Nangong Firen closed his eyes as the image of Yi Qing Luo's stunning face appeared in his mind. She pursed her lips tightly as she treated his wound indifferently. He should say that Yi Qing Luo was quick-witted enough to know that under such circumstances, one more person's strength meant one more chance of survival. So she specially used a medicinal powder to numb the pain on his wound. Or should he say that Yi Qing Luo was heartless to those who weren't her companions? Once this medicinal powder was used, after the medicinal effect had worn off, he would suffer hundreds of times more pain than now. Seventh sister, even if this stone wall can stop the corpse puppets, but this tomb will collapse any time. We'd better think of a way to leave this place first. Yi Fengru's voice revealed his gentleness at this moment. He lowered his eyelids as he gently patted the sobbing Nan Gonglin who was in his arms. Everyone's gaze immediately focused on Yi Qing Luo. To leave or not to leave, everything depended on Yi Qing Luo's decision. Yi Qing Luo's expression was calm as her lips curled into a faint cold arc. Can we leave? It's still better than sitting here and waiting for death. Yi Fengru's gentle eyebrows knitted together, and his eyes flashed with a trace of gloominess. Don't want to sit still and wait for death? Yi Qing Luo's gaze moved as she looked at Yi Fengru. Yi Fengru twisted his eyebrows. That gaze made him feel a chill run down his spine. But the arrow had already been knocked, and he could only clench his teeth and nod. The Death God Squad cannot lose any more brothers. All right. Yi Qing Luo slowly stood up and walked to the front of the stone wall, her gaze calm and indifferent. Then, for the sake of your Azura group's brothers, I need your help. Yi Fengru was startled. The surrounding mercenaries all looked at him with hopeful eyes. Even if he didn't want to, he had to agree. All right, as long as you can guarantee that everyone will survive. Yi Qing Luo didn't bother about Yi Fengru's words and directly turned around to look at the mercenaries from both sides and began to instruct them on what to do next. The tomb continued to shake. Gravel fell, and cracks gradually appeared on the ground. The corpse puppet was still hitting the stone wall. On this side, under Yi Qing Luo's arrangement, the mercenaries stood in their positions. Just as the last mercenary was about to complete his task, the stone wall suddenly exploded with a loud bang. Countless gravel flew straight towards the mercenaries' faces. The 10 Overlord group's members who stood in the front row immediately shut their eyes and moved their heads to one side. Yi Qing Luo had instructed them to stand firmly on the spot, no matter what. They cursed silently in their hearts if Yi Qing Luo had intentionally arranged for them to stand firmly at the front. Chapter 834. The whistling wind kept ringing beside their ears as it swept up the incoming gravel. Bam! The gravel was blown off its trajectory as it crashed onto the rock wall. First row attack! Yi Qing Luo's calm, commanding voice was heard beside their ears. The mercenaries instinctively obeyed the command as they raised the weapons in their hands and attacked towards the 5 corpse puppets in front of them. After the rock wall was smashed open, those 5 corpse puppets instantly rushed up. The 5 corpses were burnt by the intense fire, and even though they had swallowed the air freshener pill, the burnt stench was faintly discernible in their noses. Perhaps it was because they had been burnt earlier, which infuriated the 5 corpses. The 5 corpses' howls were mournful and strange, making one's heart tremble. The first row of mercenaries were all members of the Azura group. Recalling Yi Qing Luo's serious instructions, even though they were terrified, they still went up to attack and started the mission which Yi Qing Luo had given them. The few of them worked together, but there was no way to win the advanced corpse puppets. After they wrapped the things which Yi Qing Luo had passed to them onto the 5 corpses, they swiftly retreated. The second row of mercenaries immediately went up to them. The corpse puppets had strong explosive power, but they were after all refined by arrays. Other than exterminating all the living creatures in the tomb and merging them into one with themselves, they didn't know how to think about other things. Because of this, these mercenaries listened to Yi Qing Luo's instructions and wouldn't go head on against the corpse puppets. Only when the front row attracted the attention of the corpse puppets, the back row swiftly wrapped the things onto the 5 corpses. Following that was the 3rd row. 4th row. By the time all the mercenaries had completed their mission and retreated to one side, they saw a black shadow leaping over the top of the tomb. It was Yi Qing Luo. She stood in the middle of the 5 corpses as her eyes were filled with a chilly glint. The black outfit wrapped around the lady's slender petite figure, and the cherry blossom on her arm was extremely eye-catching. Her slender fingers held a red feather fan, and while she didn't dare to move her fingertips, a gush of powerful aura exploded from her. Huff! Huff, huff! A strong gust of wind swept everything in the tomb. It was clearly only the energy of a low-level profound practitioner, yet the imposing aura it emanated and the profound energy that swept out from the feather fan was so sharp, unstoppable, and intimidating. Yi Qing Luo's footwork changed rapidly, not daring to make any mistakes. The feather fan in his hand was constantly fluctuating with profound qi. She guided the 5 corpse puppets to move in her designated position. Those 5 corpse puppets, after chasing Yi Qing Luo for several rounds, started to howl in anger to demonstrate their might. The eerie white-boned skeleton fingers turned into sharp weapons as it directly struck towards Yi Qing Luo from all directions. Vice Commander Qing Luo. Everyone was on tenterhooks as they broke out in cold sweat while looking at Yi Qing Luo, even holding their breaths. There was no way to hide. Yi Qing Luo half squinted her eyes as her feather fan flipped over her fingertips, and like a ball of moving, raging fire, it floated into the air. The corners of her mouth curled into a cold smile, and a vortex of raging flames shot down from the feather fan. It looked like a fire dragon with its mouth wide open. At the same time, Yi Qing Luo's delicate body swayed. The footwork under her feet became increasingly fast and strange, making people only able to see an afterimage. Only to see Yi Qing Luo stepping on the corpse puppet, leaping up. With a somersault, she was already standing on top of the opened feather fan. It was as if she was suspended in midair on top of the flame, blooming a gorgeous flower. That fire dragon opened its mouth and swiftly swallowed the corpse puppet completely. Yi Qing Luo landed lightly on the ground, stretched out her 5 fingers, and the feather fan returned to her palm. Chapter 835. That's right, stare. Those 5 corpse puppets, which were shrouded in black robes, all raised their heads at this moment. Under the black robes, there were pairs of faint green glows. They couldn't see their eyes or eyeballs. Only 2 balls of faint green light were embedded on those eerie white bones. It was extremely terrifying. Yi Qing Luo retreated to the mercenary group's side as she turned her head towards Yi Feng Ru, second brother. Release your heart flame. Standing by the side, Yi Feng Ru, who didn't understand what Yi Qing Luo needed his help, was stunned. Heart flame. Yi Qing Luo nodded calmly. Release your heart flame. The purer the better. The more vigorous the better. Yi Feng Ru's brows creased tightly, not understanding the meaning of Yi Qing Luo's words. Before he could ask, those 5 corpse puppets which had dispersed the fire dragon leapt towards their direction furiously. 12 balls of faint green light whizzed towards their faces, bringing along a gust of chilly air. Yi Feng Ru was so shocked that he retreated several steps as his heart pounded and his legs turned soft as his body kept shivering. Heart flame. By his ear was Yi Qing Luo's anxious roar. Yi Feng Ru didn't dare to ask what was the purpose of releasing her heart flame, as he subconsciously used his profound jade heart's energy to condense a ball of heart flame as he shot it towards the corpse puppets. At the same time, Yi Qing Luo's heart flame was also released. Those 5 corpse puppets, which pounced over, were still on the original spot as they continued to struggle, but were not able to move an inch, as though they were imprisoned on the original spot, unable to move. It's Silver Threads. It's the World Group's Vice Group leader's Silver Threads. Some mercenaries pointed out the reason why the corpse puppets were unable to move. The crowd followed the glow from the luminous pearl and looked over. They saw those 5 corpse puppets' black robes were all stuck with silver threads which glowed with a cold glint. The silver threads intertwined and penetrated through the surrounding rock walls, forming a silver thread cage which bound the corpse puppets tightly, totally unable to move. Following the direction of the silver threads, the last place which the silver threads bound was that feather fan in Yi Qing Luo's hands. The mercenaries suddenly realized the reason why Yi Qing Luo gave each row of mercenaries a piece of silver wire to wrap around the corpse puppet's body and immediately change to the next row. And earlier, Yi Qing Luo used her strange footwork to constantly change her direction, leading the corpse puppet to scurry around, in order to fix the silver threads on the corpse puppet onto the 2 sides of the rock walls, and to form an invisible cage. The Killing God group's mercenaries' hearts were filled with shock, which made their admiration towards Yi Qing Luo unable to be expressed in words. A 15-year-old girl actually possessed such a sharp mind and strength. At this moment, these mercenaries didn't bother to ask what Yi Qing Luo needed Yi Feng Ru's heart flame for. Even Zi Qianqian remained silent and did not speak. The power of the heart flame was only a flame spark used by alchemists to refine medicinal pills. It could only be used to refine medicinal pills. It was useless for other things. Yi Qing Luo wanted to use her heart flame to burn the corpse puppet? This thought was soon confirmed. After Yi Qing Luo and Yi Feng Ru released the power of their heart flame, Yi Qing Luo's entire body seemed as though it was enveloped by a ball of blazing fire. But in an instant, that powerful energy had completely fused the 2's heart flame's energy, directly crashing onto the corpse puppet which was bound. Everyone's vision fell onto the corpse puppet side. After the heart flame fell onto the corpse puppet's body, it instantly engulfed the 5 corpse puppets. In the air, there was an extremely unpleasant burnt smell. No one discovered that the powerful energy earlier was shot out from Yi Qing Luo's wrist. Chapter 836. The corpse puppets were afraid of fire. Ordinary flames were unable to incinerate the corpse puppets. But as an alchemist, she could use the power of the heart flame condensed from the profound jade heart and borrow Old Man Song's power to force the heart flame out of her body, and then she could incinerate the corpse puppets. The heart flame was indeed used to refine pills. To other living things it had no use at all, but to the corpse puppets it was extremely useful. She only needed to treat the corpse puppets as pills to refine. But the current Yi Qing Luo, releasing the heart flame to incinerate the corpse puppets. The consequences were very serious. Old Man Tsang didn't recommend her to do so, but the arrow was already on the bow. Yi Qing Luo had no other choice. Her profound jade heart had already reacted. If she released the heart flame to incinerate the corpse puppets, it was very likely to cause damage to her profound jade heart. The power of the heart flame was in fact the power of the jade heart condensed from the profound jade heart. If Yi Qing Luo forcefully expended the power of the profound jade heart once it was damaged, she was very likely to become an ordinary person who had lost her profound jade heart. In the Ling King's tomb, once she became an ordinary person and was so weak that she had no ability to retaliate. There was no way she could survive. This was the reason why Old Man Tsang asked Yi Qing Luo to consider carefully. Because of this, she specially called Yi Fengru, who was also an alchemist. Although Yi Fengru was a dark alchemist, but his heart flame was still used to refine pills. The 5 corpse puppets kept brandishing their claws, howling in pain, trying to escape the binding of the silver thread, trying to escape the burning of the heart flame. They didn't have any rationality, didn't know how to think, but facing the feeling that was about to disappear from this world, they still had. But alas, no matter how their sharp bones tried to tear that cold silver thread, but no matter how they tried, they were unable to move the silver thread at all. The intensity of the heart flame was getting fiercer and fiercer, with a visible glow directly burned to the top of the rock wall. Increased the strength of the heart flame. Yi Qing Luo narrowed her eyes, looking at the struggling corpse puppets. Although in pain, but not completely burned out, she gritted her teeth and berated in a stern voice. This degree of fire was probably not enough to incinerate the 5 advanced corpse puppets. Lulu, prepare to release the heart flame. The last step all depends on you. Yi Qing Luo turned her head and looked at Bei Ming Lu, who was already prepared. Bei Ming Lu nodded her head vigorously. Within the azure dew bracelet, Old Man Tsang raised his voice and growled, "Girl, you're too reckless. If this goes on before the corpse puppet is completely incinerated, my profound jade heart's energy will be depleted, and I won't be able to release the power of my heart flame." The current situation didn't allow Yi Qing Luo to decide whether she was willing or not. At the very least, right now, she could still guarantee the survival of her group of brothers by forcefully consuming the power of the profound jade heart. Otherwise, when the power of the heart fire could no longer be released, all of them would be fused by the enraged corpse puppet. Yi Fengru's forehead was already dripping with cold sweat. Hearing Yi Qing Luo's words, he almost couldn't catch his breath. If this goes on, our profound jade heart will exhaust its energy. After the power of the profound jade heart was exhausted, it would take at least 3 to 5 days to recover. Yi Qing Luo dared to use such a risky method? Didn't you say that for the sake of our brother's survival, you would do anything? Yi Qing Luo scoffed lightly as her lips curled into a smirk of ridicule. Why, you can't even do such a small thing. At this moment, if one were to take a closer look, one would be able to tell that Yi Qing Luo's eyes were hiding a smear of strenuous effort and stubbornness. Only, when Yi Fengru heard Yi Qing Luo's ridicule, his attention had already been diverted. He secretly clenched his teeth and could only release the power of the heart flame even more ferociously. Chapter 837. In her chest, there seemed to be a raging fire incessantly burning. Wave after wave of scorching sensation whizzed towards her heart. Yi Qing Luo's breathing became heavy. She clenched her teeth, forcing herself to take a deep breath, trying hard to maintain the momentum of the heart fire. Lass, you can't continue to be brave. Let the divine doctor from the Bei Ming family come over and take over. This profound jade heart of yours can no longer be used up. Old man Tsang's tone was solemn as he berated her. Yi Qing Luo herself also felt it. The place where the profound jade heart was hidden was completely scorching hot, as though it was about to expand and explode. That profound jade heart was also trembling nonstop, constantly sending out warnings. It wasn't that she wasn't willing to stop, but now was a critical juncture. If she stopped, she would definitely not have the energy to support another breath, to release the heart fire. Yi Qing Luo took a deep breath. Sweat drenched her black hair, sweat dripping down from her forehead, wet her eyelashes. In the haze, she saw the corpse puppet that was restrained by the silver silk cage had already lost the strength to struggle. That wide black robe gradually turned into ashes. That ghastly white skeleton gradually turned into ashes. She fiercely took a deep breath, once again activated the profound jade heart's energy, increasing the intensity of the fire. Lulu! She called out. Bei Ming Lulu was already prepared, immediately releasing the power of the heart fire, making the last wave of heart fire attack. After Bei Ming Lulu's heart fire merged with the other two balls of heart fire, with a whoosh, the intensity of the fire once again rushed to the top of the rock wall. SSSS Hua! A crisp shattering sound came from Yi Qing Luo's body. When the 5 corpse puppets were burnt to ashes, Yi Qing Luo's body fell softly to the ground at the same time. The profound jade heart couldn't hold on, directly shattered in her heart. Yi Qing Luo could even clearly feel that the 2 halves of the profound jade heart gradually disappeared without a trace of breath. Pain immediately attacked her entire body. Yi Qing Luo coughed lightly, her petite body lying on the ground, trembling slightly. Yi Fengru also went limp by the side, panting heavily, wiping off the sweat on his head. Finally, dealt with the 5 corpse puppets. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to hold on any longer. Yi Fengru was sweating profusely, panting heavily as he turned his head to look at the girl beside him. Yi Qing Luo's condition seemed to be much more serious than his. His face was deathly pale, and his forehead was covered in cold sweat. She trembled and lay on the ground, powerlessly. Even her breathing was so light that it seemed like it would stop in the next second. Yi Fengru's handsome face revealed a faintly discernible expression. His eyes slowly narrowed, and a sharp glint flashed in his eyes for a moment before disappearing. Ah, Ajahn. Yi Qing Luo's voice was extremely weak as she slowly raised her hand, wanting to ask Long Yunjian to carry her away. She knew that after losing the profound heart jade, she would become an ordinary person. However, he didn't expect that he would be so weak. She couldn't even move her body. Now even a Tom, Dick, or Harry could easily take her life. Yi Qing Luo gave a bitter smile as her lips twitched. Long Yunjian's heart had been hanging by a thread, as he kept an eye on Yi Qing Luo's condition. The minute he heard Yi Qing Luo calling his name, he immediately walked over. Only, the next second, Long Yunjian's expressionless face turned steely green and black. Yi Fengru! Long Yunjian's icy cold voice sharply called out Yi Fengru's name. Yi Qing Luo was in a daze, almost fainting. Suddenly her body felt heavy, and she hazily opened her eyes, meeting Yi Fengru's gloomy eyes. Chapter 838. Yi Qing Luo's slender brows creased slightly as her charming eyes flashed with a biting cold glint. What do you want to do? The corner of Yi Fengru's mouth curled up, his gloomy eyes filled with madness. The Death God mercenary group's purpose for appearing here. Aren't you very clear? For the Phoenix Ring. Yi Qing Luo's complexion instantly turned paler. Yi Fengru wanted to take advantage of her weakness to steal the profound Phoenix Ring? He didn't want to think too much about it. Yi Fengru had already used his actions to confirm his thoughts. Yi Fengru grabbed Yi Qingluo's arm tightly. His fingers nimbly pinched the profound phoenix ring on her index finger and tugged hard. Despicable. Yi Qingluo gritted her teeth and spat out 2 words. She didn't have the slightest bit of strength to struggle. The sharp pain in her heart made her lose the strength to struggle. This was the profound phoenix ring that Dmo Xian had given her. No one could take away the profound phoenix ring. Yi Qingluo bit her lower lip tightly, trying to use the pain to raise her spirits. Long Yunzhan wanted to step forward, but Yi Fengru used Yi Qingluo's life as a threat. The mercenaries of the World Mercenary Group didn't dare to act rashly. The current Yi Qingluo, anyone could tell that she was so weak that she had no ability to retaliate. Their hearts were burning with anxiety, and their eyes were filled with hatred and resentment as they looked at Yi Fengru. This was the kind of person who burned the bridge after crossing the river. Yi Fengru kept twisting the profound phoenix ring. Yi Qingluo's fair fingers were already covered with circles of red marks from his rough actions. But the profound phoenix ring was still firmly on Yi Qingluo's index finger, and there was no way to remove it. Seventh sister, I advise you to be tactful and hand over the profound phoenix ring. Otherwise, don't blame me for being heartless. Yi Fengru's eyes were filled with madness. This kind of expression, this kind of words, filled with threat. However, his tone was still as gentle as ever. It made one's hair stand on end. The phoenix ring was a divine artifact. After a divine artifact recognized a master, no one other than the master could use it. Just like the profound phoenix ring, other than Yi Qingluo and Dmo Xian, no one else could take the ring off from her hands. Yi Qingluo no longer had the energy to speak, as her misty eyes couldn't conceal the sharpness in her eyes. Yi Fengru snorted, and a dagger appeared in his hand. Yi Fengru, if you dare to touch a single strand of Qingluo's hair, I will immediately exterminate your Azure group. Long Yunzhan's deep and cold voice was hurriedly heard. The corners of Yi Fengru's mouth curled up in a crazed smile as he stared at the profound phoenix ring. As long as I can get the profound phoenix ring, so what if I kill everyone? As long as you still care about this beautiful and moving seventh sister, you won't dare to make a move against me. Yi Fengru had grasped the world group's sentiments and loyalty very clearly. As long as they held on to Yi Qingluo, those youngsters wouldn't dare to act rashly. There's still poison on your body, and without Qingluo's antidote, you will act up again in 2 hours' time. Xiao Jin shouted angrily, silently cursing Yi Fengru for being despicable and shameless. Yi Fengru's mouth twitched in disapproval. Seventh sister's heart isn't hard enough after all. That pill just now was the antidote, he chuckled softly. The dagger was already close to Yi Qingluo's index finger. Seventh sister, second brother will give you one last chance. If you insist on not handing over the profound phoenix ring, second brother will not go easy on you. If she couldn't take off the profound phoenix ring, then she would directly chop off Yi Qingluo's finger. She could still take the profound phoenix ring away. An icy cold touch was felt from her index finger. Yi Qingluo squinted her eyes as her lips moved coldly, spitting out 2 words at him. "Ai pui!" A mouthful of saliva was directly spat on Yi Fengru's face. Chapter 839. Fengru, stop it. Nangong Firen held onto her arm weakly as she struggled to stand up. However, Yi Fengru seemed as though he couldn't hear anything from the outside world as his gaze turned sharp and his actions didn't hesitate at all. Roar! Roar, roar! At the critical moment, a sharp and piercing beast howl broke the silence of the tomb. They saw a black shadow leaping past everyone's eyes. Under the illumination of the luminous pearl, everyone could only see that sharp fangs, glistening with flowing light. Red blood slowly dripped down along the teeth. Sliding down the throat, it was extremely enchanting. Ah! A miserable shriek was heard from Yi Fengru's mouth. In everyone's line of sight, a huge leopard with shiny black fur and a body as black as ink appeared. It opened its mouth, and its sharp fangs viciously bit onto Yi Fengru's wrist. That pair of brown beast eyes were opened wide like bronze bells as it was filled with the leopard's fury. It was Shiju. The World Group's mercenaries heaved a sigh of relief as their suspended hearts slowly sunk. Yi Qingluo's lips twitched helplessly. Shiju had rushed over to save her. The minute they entered the tomb, she released Shiju and went around to check on the surrounding situation. But before Shiju returned, the tomb collapsed and they fell into the middle layer of the tomb. She had not expected Shiju to follow her scent and find its way over. Wait a minute. Found its way over. From the periphery of the tomb, it directly came to the bottom layer, which meant that Shiju had found the exit to leave the tomb. Yi Qingluo's eyes lit up slightly. Let go. Beast. Yi Fengru's miserable shriek was still ringing beside her ears. His wrist, along with that dagger, was bitten by Shiju. The dagger broke into pieces as it fell onto the ground. Unfortunately, Yi Fengru's wrist was bleeding continuously as the intense pain stimulated his consciousness. Sometimes it clenched its teeth tightly, cutting his skin and stirring his meridians. Sometimes it loosened its teeth and used that smelly tongue to lick the blood that seeped out. Heaven, the World Group, let's discuss this. If this goes on, Yi Fengru's hand will be crippled. Nangong Firen's voice trembled as she used a negotiating tone. Let Yi Fengru go, and our Azura group will give you an explanation. Bah! Qiao Jin spat fiercely. Earlier, when that scoundrel Yi Fengru wanted to chop off Qingluo's finger, why didn't he think that Qingluo's hand would be crippled? Even if Shiju didn't bite off Yi Fengru's hand, the coin dart in my hand wouldn't let him go. These words were echoed by the World Group's youngsters, just based on what Yi Fengru had done to Yi Qingluo earlier. Even if he were to die 100 times, it would not be enough to vent his anger. Shiju, kill him. That's right. Eat him alive and swallow him into your stomach. The mercenaries of the World Group roared with righteous indignation. Shiju's copper bell-sized eyes blinked as it looked at Yi Qingluo, as though it was asking, "Can I really eat him up?" His brown eyes were filled with innocence. His mouth was biting on his bloody wrist. No matter how one looked at it, it was strange. Yi Qingluo wanted to laugh, but she didn't have the energy to do so. She just moved her eyes lightly, indicating for it to let go of Yi Fengru. Shiju obediently bit Yi Fengru's arm and threw it towards Nangong Firen's direction. Following that, it lowered its head and picked up Yi Qingluo's petite body as it leapt back to Long Yunjan's side. Long Yunjan swiftly caught Yi Qingluo. Bei Ming Lu squeezed forward and helped to take Yi Qingluo's pulse. Chapter 840. The minute she said that, Bai Ming Lu stopped. The Death God mercenary group had been eyeing Yi Qingluo covetously by the side. She couldn't say anything about Yi Qingluo's current situation. Returning to her brother's side, Yi Qingluo had already relaxed as she shut her eyes weakly and leaned into Long Yunjan's arms. Qingluo, why are you still talking about sibling ties at this moment? Just let Shiju bite his hand off. Chao Jin's eyes were filled with anger as he stared at Yi Fengru, who was being supported by Wei Beilai. Yi Qingluo's eyelashes fluttered as her breathing slowly lengthened. Her slender, long fingers lightly scraped the back of Long Yunjan's hand. Long Yunjan instantly understood what Yi Qingluo was thinking. His face turned black as his gaze turned chilly as though it was covered with frost. His voice was chilly as though it was wrapped in ice. Death God mercenary group, if you don't want to die, stop the bleeding immediately. Nangong Firen was stunned when he heard that as his pupils grew wide as he turned his head and shouted anxiously, "Quickly stop the bleeding for Yi Feng Ru! Be careful of the corpse worms!" Everyone was instantly enlightened. Why did Shi Ju only bite Yi Feng Ru's wrist and didn't bite it off or directly tear Yi Feng Ru into pieces? It was because of this reason. In King Ling's tomb, blood must not be seen. If Yi Feng Ru's wrist was bitten off, it would definitely spill a lot of blood. If it attracted the corpse worms, under the situation where there was no flame, they would be swallowed by the worms directly, leaving nothing behind. So Shi Ju only cut the skin on Yi Feng Ru's wrist and kept on licking his blood. Xiao Jin clenched his fists as he clenched the gold coin darts tightly. "After we get out, kill Yi Feng Ru however you want. For now, let's spare his dog life." Long Yunjan's expression was still indifferent, but his eyes were overflowing with a thick, chilly intent, mixed with a murderous aura which was waiting to be unleashed. This is the consequence of messing around. Even if you die here, you deserve it. His cold voice was filled with anger. His pair of clear blue eyes that were as clear as lake water stared coldly at the person in his arms. He was really angry. If he wasn't angry, the usually cold Long Yunjan would absolutely not say such sarcastic words. Yi Qing Luo knew that she was in the wrong and simply didn't have any energy to respond. "How is she?" Long Yunjan's cold eyes suddenly looked at Bai Ming Lulu. Bai Ming Lulu shuddered as she coughed lightly and replied via the mercenary group badge. "Qing Luo, her profound heart jade seems to be gone." Yi Qing Luo's pulse was in a mess, to such an extent that she couldn't detect the slightest fluctuation of profound qi. This could only prove that Yi Qing Luo had forcefully exhausted the power of her profound heart jade, causing it to overload and directly shatter within her body. This kind of thing was not unheard of. The profound heart jade was gone, which meant that the current Yi Qing Luo was an ordinary person who didn't even have the ability to move. In this kind of strange and gloomy tomb, an ordinary person who did not even have the strength to walk was extremely dangerous. Long Yunjan's eyes grew colder. Yi Qing Luo, who was in his arms, couldn't help but shudder. Long Yunjan's eyes were covered with a layer of extreme coldness, as if it was covered with a thin layer of frost. He slowly squatted down and placed Yi Qing Luo by Shi Ju's side, nestling in between Shi Ju's soft fur. His cold voice seemed to be faintly discernible as it fell into everyone's ears. In order to save everyone, in order to let everyone survive, Qing Luo risked her own life. But what did she get in return? His pale thin lips gently pulled into a faintly discernible austere arc, raising his eyes. His azure blue eyes were fixated on Yi Feng Ru. Long Yunjan slowly walked towards him. "What I got in return is your Azura group burning the bridge after crossing the river, repaying kindness with ingratitude." Chapter 841. That long sword was extremely horrifying. The blade of the sword was faintly discernible with sparkling light patterns that looked like pieces of scales. The icy aura was powerful and majestic. It was as though a ball of cold current was spreading from Long Yunjan's feet. The mercenaries from the Azura group were shocked by this aura as they stared at the long sword in his hand. Their legs were already trembling uncontrollably. "All of you deserve to die." Long Yunjan's cold words came out from his thin lips. His long sword danced and swept up sword waves. Profound qi and the cold current intertwined as he slashed down. The entire tomb trembled under this powerful aura. Pieces of gravel fell one after another. The continuous tremors had already overwhelmed the tomb. The sound of gravel falling to the ground and the cracking of the ground overlapped with each other. It was obvious that the tomb was about to collapse again. "Leader of the World Group, I'm afraid this is a misunderstanding. Let's talk. Nangong Firen felt a chill down his spine when he met that pair of azure eyes. He felt suffocated. Nangong Firen was fearful of this young man who looked no more than 20 years old but had such an imposing aura. Long Yunjan really wanted to kill them. There was no other emotion in Long Yunjan's eyes. There was only a thick, killing intent. Long Yunjan ignored Nangong Firen's words. The sword chi was majestic, and the sword wave that slashed down left countless cracks on the rock wall. Nangong Firen held Nangong Lin in one hand and Yi Fengru in the other as they fled pathetically to avoid Long Yunjan's attack. More than 10 mercenaries from the Azura group turned pale as they were overwhelmed with shock. This powerful aura was definitely not something that an ordinary mystic realm cultivator could release. Long Yunjan's profound rank was at least above Earth Profound, rank 6, or even higher. Otherwise, a group of Earth Profound realm cultivators like them wouldn't be intimidated to this extent. Fengru, why are you so determined to snatch the profound phoenix ring? Zi Qianqian was also frightened by this frigid aura that felt like she was in an ice house. Her beautiful face was filled with displeasure. From the beginning, Yi Fengru was the one who wanted to snatch the profound phoenix ring, leading the Azura God Group's 30 over elite mercenaries, under the pretense of accepting the outer mission of the Ling King's tomb. In actual fact, snatching the profound phoenix ring from Yi Qing Luo's hands, even though the ring belonged to the Overlord. But after all, this divine relic had already signed a blood contract with Yi Qing Luo. Other than Yi Qing Luo, no one else could remove the profound phoenix ring. Moreover, in this kind of dangerous situation, they needed to rely on Yi Qing Luo to have a chance to leave the Ling King's tomb. Why? At this moment, Yi Fengru had to make a move. Wasn't this forcefully breaking the hearts of the 2 mercenary groups that had finally prepared to cooperate with each other? It wasn't just Zi Qianqian who didn't understand what Yi Fengru was thinking. Even Nangong Firen, who had been Yi Fengru's classmate for several years, couldn't figure out what Yi Fengru was thinking. I was the one who stole the ring, and I was the one who threatened Seventh Sister. If you want to kill me, come at me alone. Yi Fengru panted heavily. His gloomy eyes stared unblinkingly at Long Yunjan, who was filled with killing intent. He patted Nangong Firen's shoulder, indicating for him to be released. Fengru! Nangong Firen's brows creased slightly as he shouted out Yi Fengru's words. Following that, he deliberated over his words. There are many worms in the Ling King's tomb. If we were to fight here, it would only cause both of us to suffer. In the end, we will be devoured by the worms. Let's talk about everything after we leave the Ling King's tomb. Long Yunjan's long sword, which was covered with scales, kept buzzing as it vibrated gently in his palm. His azure blue eyes were filled with rays of blue light, which contrasted with the blue flowing light of the long sword, which made the coldness and callousness in his eyes even more obvious. Azura God Group's words turned a deaf ear to them